I got to tell you, I really appreciate you being here for this. I know it's going to be several hours, and you think, man, I'm a trainer, and I like to get up and move, and I got to sit for 4 or 5 hours and talk about training, but you're all nerds like me, and I'm sure it excites you. So I can promise you a couple things. One, I'm going to give you my best stuff here, so I'm not going to hold anything back. Number two, I work really hard, and you're familiar with my work. I work really hard to eliminate fluff and puff. I'm not here to impress. I'm not here to put on a show and just talk about, use big words and, million-dollar terminologies and jargon that you go, I don't know what that means, but it sounds like he's pretty smart. I'm not here to do that kind of stuff. This is for you. So everything that I've included, whether it be science, whether it be practical application, any of that stuff, it's because I think it has some effect on what you can do. Either make you rethink something you may currently be doing and go, oh, maybe that's not the best use of my client's time. Or maybe take something that you already know, but organize it in a different manner, maybe in a way that you haven't organized it, and you go, I like that. Because that is an issue right now. We have education overload. We have so many different, even just in the concept of core training, how many different approaches do we have of this? Some people just say lift heavy, other people it's breathing and everything in between. How do I organize all that stuff? What techniques have scientific efficacy? What are anecdotal? Both are okay as long as you know which is which. So those are all things that we're going to cover. Well, when I say top techniques, facts, fallacies, and top techniques, that's a very subjective term, and I'll be I believe in intellectual honesty. It's the performance you approach, my approach, people that I've worked with, people that that I consult with, other experts, researchers. So when I say top techniques, I'm not saying these are it. These are the top techniques that, I have deemed them and everybody needs to follow. No, I'm not going to be arrogant like that. So what I feel are the top techniques, kind of the go-tos if you asked me. But I'm going to give you the philosophy and show you the evidence why they've become that way. So that's the subjective part. Demonstrate the technique and application of the top core training methods used in the performance you approach. The objective part of it is we're going to look at a lot of the scientific evidence on things like core training as it relates to transverse abdominis, psoas. I'll tell you those are the two most misunderstood muscles in the body. Posture, that's a big one. Assessment and corrective exercise is a big one. Whether it be dynamic or static posture, it's all thrown in there. A little bit on performance and especially low back pain. We know that's such a huge thing. The statistics say somewhere about 90% of the population is going to have low back pain at least one point in their life. Active, inactive, overweight, normal weight, all that stuff. So I'll tell you, there's so many myths and misconceptions based on these things here. When I say myths, not because they disagree with my opinion, but because they're completely been eroded in the research. It's not like, there's one study and someone has an opinion. Some of these things have been looked at 10, 12 times, and there's a pretty good scientific consensus that they're not true, yet the claims are still out there, and many of us believe them. Now, I want to address one thing before we get into this stuff about science, because, as a teacher, as someone who tries to interact with other trainers on Facebook, and I try to do that kind of stuff, a lot of times I hear people that go, I get these rebuttals against science. Oh, there's a scientific research to validate everything. That is true. Well, science is 10 to 15 years behind what trainers are doing. All right, I want to debunk that one right now. I used to say that. I hear a lot of smart people saying that. That is an absolutely false, ego-driven statement. All right, number one, there's not a subject going on in training right now that you cannot find research for. Foam rolling, core training, powerlifting, Olympic lifting, single limb training, assessment, I can go on and on. There's plenty of research on that. So science is not behind trainers. Where the ego comes in is this. Is us trainers, there's an art and a science to training. So we are a little bit creative. So we create something that is unique and cool, and then we assume that it's right, and then because we've just gone, well, I'm right, and because I just came up with it, I am now ahead of the research. That's what we do. So if you do anything, I highly recommend you read books like this, How We Know What Isn't So. This is the start. It's all about social psychology, and the little side the fallibility of human reason in everyday life. Now, this is all quite well-established stuff, but social psychology is the science of belief, why we believe things, why we divide ourselves into Republicans and Democrats, and pro-gun versus anti-gun, and pro-corrective exercise, everything. So when you read stuff like this, you understand why we have terms like self-delusion, self-deception, biases, all these cognitive biases. And you realize how deluded and biased that you are. And if you don't think you're deluded and biased, you are the most deluded and biased. So when you understand these concepts, you understand that just because you invent something doesn't mean you are right. You are convincing yourself you are right. And it doesn't mean science is behind, because you're saying, I am ahead of science. What science does, by peer review and by blinding and all these things and asking for replicability from multiple parties, is it seeks to eliminate those biases and self-delusions. To see that you haven't deceived yourself, or that nature, as they say, hasn't deceived you into believing something that is not true. So we are not ahead of science. In fact, it's the opposite. And what you're going to find when we look at the science with these things, you're going to see that some of us are practicing stuff that's been eroded in the research. The research has shown us repeatedly. So I'm not going to say, oh, one study shows this. Yes, there is pretty much one study or two that can validate anything. What I'm talking about is the consensus. 10 studies show this, 2 studies show this. I'm going with the 10. That's the difference. I haven't heard, I'm not making this a lecture on science, but I have not heard one good rebuttal against science when I utilize that. They're always easily debunked. So I just wanted to cut that right off the bat. You guys already know who I am, so I just wanted to show that because I just like to include the I'm what Willis was talking about picture. So we don't need to go into the bio part. In regards to questions, before we just jump right in, we're obviously filming this for a DVD, so I want you guys to ask questions, because that's going to help people that are watching it when this goes to DVD. So just, say it kind of loudly. If I have to repeat it, I'll repeat it. But this is your class. I want you to get the most of it. I promise you I got a lot of information on here. But at any time you want me to repeat something, show it again, or you have a thought, or you want to hear, hey, I've heard differently, what do you have to say about this? That's all totally game. In fact, I encourage that. Deal? All right. So this is the big question. The first thing, one thing is I've learned to establish is we have to decide what we're talking about. The key, like functional training. If I ask 3 of you guys separately what is functional training, you're going to give me a definition of functional training that's based off of your training bias. If you like to lift heavy stuff and do powerlifting, functional training for you is picking up heavy stuff. If you're into 3-dimensional stuff and balance devices, then functional training to you is standing on balance devices and moving in 3D. So before we even talk about core training, I'm going to tell you at least what I feel it is, and I don't think it's going to be too hard to disagree with, plus I'll also tell you where the definition came from. First off, a lot of people don't know this, but the first time the term the core in regards to muscles, not like the core of the earth or something like that, was referenced was a book in 1982. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, Gadja, and Dominguez. Bob Gadja, I hope I'm not butchering his name, actually was Mr. America in 1966. That's the book cover, Total Body Training. So, cool book if you can get a hold of it somewhere. Actually, it has 2 different covers. That's the original cover, and then there was another cover that has like a woman and a man doing like a dumbbell exercise or something like that. But it's Total Body Training. So if you asked me, simple terms, the core is your entire torso if we took off your arms and legs. And I don't think I'm the first person to say that. So that includes all the muscles that surround your spine. Neck, glutes, abs, back, scapula, pecs, obliques. Think about it. Your arms and legs are called extremities. Extremities of what? The center. However, I don't want to perpetuate a myth just because this is a core training class. I also have a back training DVD. I have a single leg training DVD. I'm not going to perpetuate a myth that the core is somehow this magical, mysterious part of your body that all you do is strengthen that and everything else magically gets better. So we're going to get further into that as you'll see in the training. I will tell you right now, I'd say the best core exercises are not core exercises. They're integrated exercises. Oh, that's the other cover right there. So this is actually right from the book. The foundation of total body training is the core, which compromises the muscles in the center of the body. These muscles stabilize the body while in upright, standing, anti-gravity position, or while using the arms and legs to throw or kick. These muscles maintain the body structure during vigorous exercises such as running, jumping, shoveling, and lifting weights. These muscles also control head, neck, ribs, spine, and pelvis. That's basically saying the core is involved in everything that we do. And I think the way they had it, I'd go, absolutely. Look at what we're talking about now. This was done in, what did I say? What was the date? 82? Go to core classes, everything, and then we have inner unit and outer unit. We have, the core is the abdominals and low back, and then you have special exercises for it and all these things. What these guys were talking about, they're just saying it's the center of the body that just kind of controls the limbs, maintains your structure. I think if we go back to that, we're already kind of doing it, we'll be in a pretty good spot. And a lot of the research shows specific core training doesn't necessarily help improve performance. Some studies came out in the NSCA journal, and that was a real big deal. Well, yeah, if we said doing bicep curls, an isolated exercise, didn't improve that much sports performance except in doing a curl competition or making bigger biceps, nobody would be shocked. Because we go, yeah, you need to train the body as a unit, said principle. So when we get down on the floor and do a plank, that's like a biceps curl for the abs. And then we are shocked when the research comes out and says, well, it didn't really help us run any faster. We don't even apply the same logic. So, it brings me to this. What does the core do? Because we know what the core does, then we know how to train it. Just ask it to do what it does and overload it. Right? That's the principle. So, first thing, we're not going to go over exercises for this, but the abdominals role in respiratory is basically the forced huff, not what they call quiet breathing, which is what we're all doing right now, just normal breathing. That's mainly from your diaphragm, scalenes, things like that. But if you do a forced huff, expiration, that's when your abdominals come in. Not breathing in, but breathing out, that's when your abdominals come in. All right. So I'm not going to go over if you really want to do an abdominal exercise, a high-load abdominal exercise for breathing, obviously blowing up balloons or like the old school bodybuilders used to blow up the jugs. You definitely have to have some strong abs to do that. So I definitely think that from a said principle, there might be some efficacy in doing that, although that's not part of this lecture. All right, or workshop. These are the two big ones I want to go over. You hear this one a lot, and it's absolutely true, but it can be deceiving. One of the functions of the core is to transfer force from the hips to the shoulders. And, some people call it the Serape effect. Other people call it the spiral line. We hear anterior, posterior oblique system. All different terms for generally the same stuff. Right? I like to call it the X factor, but I'm not claiming to invent anything new here. So basically what it comes down to this. When we talk about transfer force, you're either transferring force from this hip to this shoulder, this hip to this shoulder, or both hips to both shoulders. Right? So that would be, for instance, like throwing a punch or a push press. Right? This is acting, it's remaining stiff to give me a stable platform for both my extremities to produce force. The more this moves, the more force is dissipated out. Make sense? That's just physics. All right. So we got that part. But where this can be deceiving, so that's where stiffness comes in. So a lot of our weight training exercises, especially going overhead or push-ups or even squats, that's stiffness. That's where we're transferring force. Right? But that almost gives us the impression that the core only has kind of like a passive role. It only just kind of sits there and just kind of channels force up and down or across, basically diagonally, horizontally, or vertically. But it also helps us produce force. So here it needs to be stiff, here it needs to be stiff. But here, it's actually acting as part of a lever in the summation of all the levers to produce maximal force. Think about if I were to ask you to throw something overhead. Are you going to throw it harder if you remain stiff? Or are you going to throw it longer if you go, what am I doing? I'm eccentrically loading here as well. So when we talk about power production, people say it's the summation of force. Yeah, but more accurately, it's the summation of all your levers. More levers involved, more force output. What is your spine? One big series of levers. Each segment is a lever. So in cases like a baseball swing, there's a reason why my shoulders go further than my hips, because I'm winding this up too. So there is some force generation there, not just force transfer, where it has a very active role. Make sense? So we need to understand both, because if we understand both, we need to train both. I always hear this one. I rarely hear people talking about it as it's actually an active role, where there's some movement involved in it. Or some eccentric lengthening, a pre-stretch before you explode. So like swinging a baseball bat or a golf club is a good example. And you guys already know this. This is all about the SAID principle. But like I said, if we want to talk about improving core function, because we all know that we're not spot training. We're not training the core to lean out our abs. That's done in the kitchen, right? But we can enhance function, strength, performance, stiffness, all that stuff. So we're basically just applying the SAID principle. Whatever you do in training, you get better at doing outside of training. And the further the exercise is away, or the movement is away from what you're doing, the less carryover it will have. That's a proven principle. So we don't have to have every exercise. So back to this science stuff again. You don't have to have research for every exercise you do. Meaning if I say, oh, I have research for this, but as soon as I turn my hand like this, there's no research there. Oh, well, no, it stands to reason, based on the SAID principle and based on how other research is, that's pretty similar, so it's not a huge leap to say that will probably help. You understand what I'm getting at? So we don't need research for every little thing. If we follow this is well established. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use the principle of overload to overload specific movement type patterns that are integrated, and we're going to talk about some isolated training as well too. So that's pretty much, we got maybe one or two more slides of some science stuff here. And then what I'm going to do, most of the time us speakers, we put all the science in the beginning and make you sit for a couple hours, and then you get up. I'm going to do the opposite, right? But when I say get up, I don't necessarily mean everybody's going to jump up and I'm going to boot camp you or anything like that. I might have one person come up, we'll demo, a couple times we may come over to here, I might have everybody stand around and say, see how, coach this, hey, try it, make sure we get it. But I'm not going to go over any exercise that I know you guys already know and you know how to do, or I have a YouTube video out and I can say, hey, just go to YouTube. All right. So, summation of all your levers. So, that kind of summarizes our belief the core has an active role, not just a passive role, active as in part of that lever of force summation. There's two instances where the spine and core is acting as an additional lever. It's not just remaining stiff. Is there parts in it where it has to be stiff? Sure. But there's a load and explode that's happening there. Just as you would load your legs and explode. There's a length change there. During things like swinging a bat, racket, and even certain instances throwing a punch or throwing a kick. Now, we'll get into some research. This is actually something I got off of an interview on somebody's website with Dr. Stu McGill. He's talking about speed. And I talked a little bit about this. I gave you guys a short lecture several months ago, so I want to really get into this now. So this is what he says. Fighters need to activate muscles extremely quickly and then be able to relax them to allow the middle section, the speed generation, basically the momentum of the leg or the hand if it's in the case of a punch, or the middle of the bat in case of a swing, of the double pulse activation to happen. We're going to get into that, what that double pulse means. This is also applied, and this comes from the guy who interviewed him now. Also applied when Dr. McGill measured the muscle activities of great distance hitters in golf. Although the golfers aren't the strongest, the long distance hitters have this gift of kind of creating a pulse. Now, we're going to get further into that, what that means. So that's fairly new research that McGill did looking at golfers and some elite UFC level fighters. But actually, this stuff kind of came out in the 90s, and it was called triphasic EMG. Several studies came out. Most of them looked at like the elbow or the shoulder, and I don't think any of them were done like looking at the full trunk. But again, if it works on most joints, I'm sure it works on every other muscle, because all our muscles are generally designed the same. So here's what they found. So using the elbow as an example here, when they went to extension movements, and I'm going to use flexion as an example instead of extension, at speeds ranging from ballistic, so fast, to very slow. So basically they measured the muscle firing pattern, let's say doing a slow elbow flexion to up as fast as you possibly could, and then repeats. And what they found obvious is when they go slow, you have a single phasic agonist contraction. So if I'm doing this, the bicep turns on. Great. But at the fastest movements, when momentum and speed were involved, this triphasic EMG pattern happened. So you got an agonist burst, then an antagonist. So if I went like that, what's happening, this is what McGill was calling a pulse. They called it a burst, same thing. It was pop, but then a relaxation, then a pop somewhere in between that, and then towards the end, another pop. Just a quick boom, 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 boom. Like that. Now what does that tell you right off the bat? If we're talking about specific adaptations to impose demands, meaning whatever you do, you got to train like what you do, well, there's a big difference between pushing a heavy sled, single phasic, slow contractions, and sprinting. Because there's a triphasic action that happens there. You never hear about anybody pulling a hamstring pushing a sled. How many people pull or tear hamstrings sprinting? The deceleration, there's something with that synergy, and it's not flexibility, because they're sure as heck not got the legs up here, they're just here. So it's not a flexibility limitation. So there's something about that boom, 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 that quick synergy. I don't know, I can't claim to say I know the answer, but there's a different neuromuscular pattern. That's what we're talking about here. So where this comes into training is basically what I told you. Slow, heavy exercises or isometrics, like these anti-rotation exercises and, you know, the landmines. Great stuff. Great for building isometric strength, stiffness, but it doesn't refine the triphasic firing pattern. You want to get good at moving fast and teach your body to deal with it. You got to do stuff. Not only moves fast, but also has some momentum involved. Because if I take a band, a heavy band, you know, it doesn't accumulate its own zip like a cable would. You know, if I ripped it, the cable would go zzz and zing up. It doesn't have its own fly. That band will always pull me back. But even if I go and I rip the band, even if that band's heavy enough, the band is already pulling me back. But if I throw a medicine ball, nothing is pulling me back. The only thing that prevents my arms from falling off or going with the ball is all the muscles that were opposite what I just did. Make sense? Different firing patterns. Am I saying one's better than the other? No, you just got to do them both. Do them both. And if I had to put them on a spectrum, I'd say these are much more complex, so I'd put them earlier in the program. Make sense? Cool. So when we talk about specific exercise using the SAID principle, the applications for force summation involve fast speeds, should say speed, or speeds, and momentum, especially in rotational actions. How many things do we do in sports that are rotational oriented? Everything. How many things do we do in the gym? A few medicine ball throws. And then when we do them, we take the cable and we go, here. So you want to talk about functional training, I think that's a gap. I think that's a gap between the principles of how the body works, which we know from research, the principles of training, which we know from research, the SAID principle, and the application. I look and I go, when I take the 2 arrows and I go here, I don't get what I see. I get lots of momentum enhanced, speed enhanced, rotational work that involves throwing things, hitting things. Make sense? All right, so what do we have here? If we want to get into, MET means momentum enhanced training. That's just my little fancy terminology. It's not like a trademark or anything like that. Throwing stuff is great. Throwing stuff is great. We got this force summation thing happening. So when we talk about using the torso as a lever, I like that because you see that actually being integrated as one of the levers. One of the reasons I'm not a big fan of just these overhead ball slams, first of all, I think the range of motion is very, very short. So if I had the choice, I'm going to go against the wall, or if we don't have a wall to throw against, I'm going to go to a partner that's about 10 feet away because I can get more of a pre-stretch and more range of motion versus right there.
What if you just opened up a little bit more?
I mean, I'm not saying it's not bad. I'm just saying if I have the choice, I'm going with that one because opening up a little more certainly helps, and I like how you're thinking. But that one I have to coach up, versus if I give you something in front of it, it happens automatically. So medicine ball overhead throw, especially with a step, that big step. Look at what that pre-stretch. All right? Now you're going, well, Nick, we already do medicine ball throws. Yeah, but maybe you have a new appreciation for them, because when I read this stuff, I went, maybe I need to do more of these things, because I was doing a few for warm-up. I could, take it or leave it. Now I went, man, I gotta emphasize some of this stuff with some of my athletes, especially people who are in golf, tennis, striking, lacrosse. I went, wow, I think I need to do more of this. Chest throw with step. I'm not a big fan of standing here going like this. I like this step, and I tell people lean and go. I want that total force summation. I want that pre-stretch load, bang, to explode. I want to use this to summate force. So you guys don't need demonstrations on these, right? You got it. All right. Rotary throws. And I have a YouTube video on this one, but there's basically top three. And I could go into progressions on this, and if we do a medicine ball class eventually, we'll talk about that. But this is more about core, so I don't want to get off topic and about power progressions and whatnot. But basically 3 rotational throws. If the screen is the wall or a partner, I could either do a side scoop toss, here to here, you know that one, front scoop toss, here to here, or a punch toss, here to there. I like all those, but I want those shoulders to go past the hips so I can get a pre-stretch here. Now, one little thing here about spine sparing, what I'm really coaching there, at least into the throw, I'm not even going to get into the load, is I want to see that foot, if I'm throwing this way, I want to see that foot rotate through, because there is a point when the shoulder meets up with the hip, now the core's got to be stiff to finish the drive. If this stays stable and this just goes, it's all in my spine. I'm not involving my hips. Now I don't have a good load share. I don't have a good force summation. And I also am overloading one particular group of joints. The chance of me getting hurt, creating an overuse injury, is greatly enhanced there. So I'm looking at doing that as well. So I like the separation of shoulders and hips. But when we come through, look at the shoulders and hips now. They're right on, and then they finish. So there is a force summation and then force transfer. So it does both of them. But you try it. If you just think the core is just transferring, all you would do is you'd keep the shoulders and hips stiff and you'd hold them like this and then try to throw the ball. You'd not nearly throw it as hard. And you'd really mess up somebody's golf swing or baseball swing or whatever. So like I said, this stuff has applications if you just watch how people move. And the reverse scoop toss, that's just here. Launching it 45 degrees behind you. I tell people, launch it 45 degrees if we have the room, and you can also go straight up. That'd just be a high scoop toss. But 45 degrees, if they throw it straight, I'm sure you guys find it too, they tend to overextend their back. But look at what happens here. As soon as I go, whoosh, this has to burst, and then boom, this has got to lock in to prevent me from going too far. So you got a really nice synergy there. No, most people do it. I just tell them, so if it's a real beginner and I'm worried about them overextending, normally I'll tell them to go throw the ball about 45 degrees behind you, and I'll tell them to stop when your arms are dead above their head. So I'll go like this, and just tell them to stop right there. Normally and if they have to hold themselves back a little bit, that's fine. But the fact is they're still moving fast with momentum, and I keep the ball kind of light. Obviously the loads are not heavy here.
Yeah, that's my next question. How do you determine the load on a medicine ball, like beginner to advanced?
Very, very good question. Some people will say like, 10% of body weight, 5% of body weight. I mean, sometimes they'll throw out things like body weight. The problem is, what if you're dealing with a guy like me and you got a fat lineman who's 330? And he's slightly obese. I'm not saying he's not athletic, but he isn't an NFL lineman and he is obese. You got to be a big body. You actually see some research why you need to be a big body. So I don't go by body weight. So for the most part, on big throws like this, even for big strong people, I tend to stay 20 pounds or less. If you want to get kind of really nerd out about it, I like to do this as getting more into power training, but it can apply. Some people, you're either naturally strong, and if you're naturally really strong, you tend not to be that fast. And if you're naturally fast, you tend not to be that strong, in general. So one person has good strength, speed, the other person has good speed, strength. So if you have good speed, strength, which means you tend to naturally be quick, but not as strong, then I'm going to get you on what you don't have as much. So I'm going to go a little bit heavier. If you're the opposite, I'll make the ball a little lighter because I'm encouraging you to move faster. And if you like to undulate, like I do, if you're training them 2 days a week, some days you go lighter ball, faster and enhance speed, coach up the speed of the movement, so throw it as fast as you can. So get here, whoo, just get it out as quick as possible. The next time, like Monday and Thursday, you go a little heavier and you coach throw the ball as far as possible. So this is getting into the power lecture. But good question. All right. So that's my little joke. Throw stuff, hit shit. Moving athletically. And it's task-oriented, which is great. And it's fun. The gladiator twist, I'll show you that. You guys all know, hammers. That's, super trendy these days. Do you happen to have like either like an easy curl bar or like a body bar or something like that?
Yeah, easy curl bar.
Yeah, can you just grab me easy curl bar real quick, brother? And then also an AirX pad.
Weighted or?
No weight, just the plain.
I don't have an AirX pad. How about just a mat? Does that work?
Yeah, mat would be great. They're right here, right? Okay. So while he's grabbing that, do you guys have any questions so far about anything? All makes pretty good sense, right? So far, we haven't even really talked about, like I said, the best core exercises aren't really core exercises. We're really just talking about using the body as a whole and letting the core do what it does best, which is the bridge. Either help the extremities be a stable platform through stiffness or be a lever to summate with the extremities.
Nick, when would you program this into your workout?
Early in the workout. After the warm-up, we go right into this stuff.
Any particular reason why you play that beginning?
Yeah, because it's my feeling. I can't say I have any direct research to say this or whatever, but for the same reason the general rule of thumb is compound exercises before isolation. Well, why is that? More motor unit recruitment, it's more demanding on your central nervous system or your body, it's more complex, whatever. Well, this stuff is very complex. Multi-joint, synergistic movement of every joint working together in a nice synchronistic pattern. There's a pop, pop, pop. There's lots of things happening. So to me, when I look at anything that seems very complex and demanding, it's fast, multi-joint. All these things, I'm putting it early on. And think about it like this. If you put something like this at the end of a workout, I think when you're already gassed and your chest muscles are gassed and your legs are gassed, I think you're definitely more likely to strain something. Here's the best example. When are you more likely to hurt yourself running sprints? After 10 sets of 10 squats or doing them before? We all know the answer. Well, that's basically what we're talking about here. All right, so let me show you guys this gladiator twist real quick. I think this is a pretty cool exercise. It's fun. Can I get someone to come up here real quick? And all I need you to do, this is just going to be my target. I just need someone to hold this, just hold this mat. Just hold it like this for me. The arms out, just nice and tight. Yeah, just stand where I'm at, please. You can do an easy curl bar. Good, I'm not going to hit you, I promise. So what I do is I want my shoulders, now I'm working on stiffness here. So I want my shoulders and hips to move together, and all I coach the client to do is keep your hands kind of like this. Look at my shoulders and hips moving at the same rate. So the way I like to say that is I say rotate but don't twist. So my body's rotating, but that would be twisting. Make sense? And then so we have them, and then I just have to speed it up as fast as they can go. Now I'm going as fast as I can. And it's like the anaconda just wrapped around. Ugh. Lock tight, because this has to remain stiff to decelerate and then accelerate. Torque conversion, back and forth. A couple of you guys get up and try this real quick. It's no joke. Dominic, you're the birthday boy. 10 seconds of birthday gladiator twist.
How long would you have someone do that?
10-second burst. So the first thing I'll have him do is extend your arms out a little bit. Yeah, just like here. Let me get over here so I just want you to measure it. Yeah, so what I'm looking here when they coach is I tell them to do a little Elvis. Kind of go like this. I want to see the foot pivot, and I just want to look at the shoulders and hips stay pretty together, right? Good, and then go to the other side. So now your goal, so you're kind of, most of your weight is on the front of your feet. You know, you're not up like this, but you need to be able to go like this. Hips and shoulders move together. Good, now gradually pick it up, and as soon as you hit that pad, reverse, go the other way. Now quick as you can, 10 seconds, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5 more seconds, and I like that he's not doing this. He's here. Time. Nice work. Just right here, bang, it just locks you in. It just locks you in. Yeah, that's a little heavy for that. Cool, that's good. You guys can try some of this stuff later, but this is one of those ones, it's fun, it's deceivingly tough. You could do it on a punching bag. This is not the best bar for it, but like a weighted bar or a body bar. Normally like 8 pounds or less, even for strong folks.
Per se, like a TRX rib trainer, you did one side at a time. Is that the same?
See, it's a great question. I like this concept. You know, I got the core bar. It's very similar to that. But when we're talking about momentum-enhanced training or speed training, that band is already ripping you back if the band is back there. In this case, I want momentum to get me that way, and then I need the muscles to have to decelerate the momentum I created, and then that torque back and forth. So that slow, all it does is burn out my shoulders because gravity's pulling it down. But when I start moving fast, I build momentum up. That momentum creates load. That's exactly like when you sprint. That's what's happening. Like that. And the reason why this has to be tight is because there's momentum, and this has to now keep transferring back and forth. That's what you're doing there. So that's more of a stiffness exercise. I don't coach it where you're like this because I think that's when you can start hurting yourself.
So if you had a beginner, how many per se, like sets and reps or something like that?
Well, first off, you need to make sure somebody can coordinate hip and shoulder. So you've got to coach it just like anything else. You start slow, then you gradually have them speed it up. Also, the more they go into it, so the smaller the target is in front of them, like that's real small, it's like this, the harder it is. So you might start them with a bigger target, like a bag. That way they don't have to go here and here. Most people can coordinate that. And what I want to see is that. I want to see the whole linkage doing it, not that. Now, I'll tell you right off the bat, I'm not a card-carrying member of any kettlebell cult, nor will I ever be. And I'm not an elitist for any particular exercise tool, device. You know, say, oh, this is the best, and that's all you need to do, and whatnot. So, kettlebell is just a tool. But what makes the kettlebell unique is the fact that the weight is outside my hand versus a dumbbell, duh. But when you swing, there's momentum involved with that. So the kettlebell still wants to either continue to go up or continue to want to go out. That definitely, when you do that fast, that's a triphasic EMG type of response. So there's something that you can talk about to every kettlebell person, enthusiast that I've talked to, they've never heard that before. And I go, that's why I do kettlebells. Not because I took a certification and I just think it's awesome now. I do it because to utilize a principle of specificity and enhance that momentum speed type reflex, that triphasic reflex, this is a good tool for it. So obviously we have swings. You can get that. I don't need to talk to you guys about swings. I am not a big fan of cleans and doing snatches for clients. Why? Because it takes too much time to coach. I have no time, no desire to do any exercise that makes you a master of an exercise. I've never trained a client, nor will I ever train a client, who's trying to become a master of exercise. They're either trying to use exercise to look better, which is a goal outside the gym, or to perform better in another sport, not to get good at exercising. So I don't involve, I just want you to be competent and not hurt yourself. Right? But anything that involves technical skill, Olympic lifts, the same thing, they're all great stuff. I just don't include them because to me it takes time away from getting you results where we could be burning calories and stimulating muscles, not spending 35 minutes just to master an exercise. So you can still be 20 pounds overweight and go, yeah, but I can do a snatch now. All right? So to me, that's not delivering good value to my client, unless that's their goal. If that's their goal, completely different story. I just don't train people for the goal of getting better at those types of exercises. Now, that being said, so understanding that this kettlebell is a nice tool for building momentum, I said, well, why can't we do something like this for rotation? So same things apply. You guys know, grab it in the horn and all that stuff. You can go here, hip and shoulder moves together. I'm going to, instead of going this way and then, catching it, I'm going to go here and just kind of decelerate before it smacks me in the shoulder. That's a really heavy shoulder. And then I can go back. I can go right there. Now I have to go burst, decelerate, and then you can start doing it in chips. That's just like a boxer. That's a little bit heavy. A boxer will go quick torque conversion. So if you're good, if you're competent with a kettlebell, try that, man. That will really, you'll just go, oh my God. But the same thing applies. We want safety first. Hips and shoulders move together. I want them to go together because I want this to be stiff. Working on stiffness here. The only time we're looking at that force summation tends to be rotary type work where you can really set it up. But when we're talking about in close, like boxing, sprinting, and also safety reasons, I want to keep it a little bit tighter. Because remember we talked about anyway, even in a baseball swing, from here to here we have force summation, but once we line up, that's the power zone. We still need stiffness anyway. So if I had to say one or the other, if you're unsure with using it as a force driver, stick with the stiffness part. When it comes to accelerating force, I like boxing and I like medicine ball throws. That pretty much does it. Everything else is mainly keeping it locked in tight. You want to try this real quick? You seem to be getting excited. He was looking at yeah. So you know how to hold a kettlebell. Good. So I want you to do, let's go slow for a second. I want this and this to move together. So just take it across just like this. Yep, so that's what I want to see. That's the coaching point. So when you do it, don't let your arms extend out because you're going to throw it so the kettlebell is just going to go about there. And then just kind of stop it before it smacks in the shoulder. That's all. Good. We'll start back from the beginning. So you got to do it fast. So now from there, rip it, and then stop. Yep, and then rip it back. Nice. So he's good. So I like this and this. They're right where I want it to be. He's freeing up his heel. That lets me know he's utilizing this hip. Make sense? So now give me a double. Go pop, 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 pop. Good. So that's how we'd progress it. And then the final would be a 3. Good. Pop, pop, pop. And then stop, reset, and then he would go back the other way.
Feel that? That's good.
Yeah. Speed. Yeah, anybody who's fairly proficient at kettlebells picks that up right away. As long as it's this that they may have a hard time with. But in regards to the mechanics of exploding and then stop before it goes, they got that because they spent so many times smashing themselves in the shoulders already learning how to do the kettlebell.
One thing I did notice though is you probably want to keep that light because you definitely
Yes.
bring up a lot. No, you gain a lot of force.
Oh, the kettlebell is building. Yeah. Yeah.
Decelerate.
Yeah. All right. Well, the key word here is this. I haven't said anything heavy. If the goal is fast. So even when I was talking about the undulation, I'm still saying under 20 pounds or whatever. I mean, for a guy like him, strong as he is, what's your deadlift? 5 something plus? Yeah, 5'10" deadlifter. What is this, like 20 pounds? He's going, that's heavy. So I'd say that would be on a heavy day for him.
Right, yeah.
And then the other day we might go to a 10-pound kettlebell and he's just pop, 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 pop. Fast. The faster you go, the more burst you get. Dumbbell punches.
Is that called a rotary swing?
Yeah, I just call it a rotary swing. And I am taking credit for that exercise. I'm the only person, I never learned that from anybody, and I know I'm the first person to, publish that somewhere. Maybe someone else had come up with it before, but I know I'm the first person to publish that and put some stuff out there. So, all right. Dumbbell punches. This one creates a lot of confusion because I'll be the first person to say I'm not a big fan of loading skills. I would never have a boxer, put one of those bands around their back and actually work on their jab and their accuracy or even hit a bag. I think that will mess up your timing. So I'm saying the key word there is skill. I'm not going to load a skill. However, when I say dumbbell punches here, I coach it. I say don't lock your elbow And the goal is just to create rotation at high velocity. So I say go across the midline of your body. So midline of the body is my nose. Get here, here, here. Look at the hip and shoulder. And I want back. I want to see that whole body, the Elvis thing happening. And no lockout. And no lockout. That is a torso exercise. And what I really like about this one especially, what else is it bringing in? The scapulars. The scapulars protracting and retracting all in that quick, synergistic, pop, 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 triphasic type action. I like that. And I like doing things in 8 to 10 second bursts. So an easy one to go for is 3 threes, which is a minute. 10 seconds, rest 10. 10 on, 10 off is 20 seconds, times 3, 1 minute. And so I'd rather you just go as fast as you can for 8 to 10 seconds. By the way, that's, is about your power range anyway. After 12 seconds or so, you start to die off. Now, this should be obvious, but I'll say things anyway. Obviously, I wouldn't do all of these in one workout. It's like you pick one.
I was actually going to search all these.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Until somebody's vertebrae just goes and takes off like a helicopter. Yeah. Did I get? Oh, there's.
How much time would you spend? About 5 to 10 minutes in the workout? What's your?
Well, it depends on the athlete.
Okay.
So obviously, someone who's doing more of this stuff, maybe a little bit more, but I would say no more than 1 or 2 exercises. So that would be one set a minute.
Right.
10 on, 10 off 3 times. That would be one set. I might do a lower body exercise or something like that. 3-4 rounds. It might be it. But that doesn't mean I'm not also going to do some high-load rotational exercises and some other things as well. But I want to address this quality, this component. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. I have to say, if I had to pick one of these that you could say, Nick, if you're just going to use one of them with every client that walked in the door, you didn't even know who was going to walk in the door. We were just going to send you random people. One was going to be a pro football player. The other one was going to be his mom. Next one's going to be his grandma. And you said, how would you incorporate this in, and you could throw something in for everybody? I would say, give me a 4-pound medicine ball. And, grandma can still go, boom, and then the ball ding, 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 boom. And I'd put him against the wall, and he'd go, bah, 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 but some versions of that. Now, one argument, before I get into this tight rotation, that's from a magazine. I came up with this tight rotation exercise of a variation of what I learned from Rio's dad, J.C. Santana. So, but the way I learned it from him, I talked to Stu McGill about it, and he was like, oh, it might be a little tough on the back, so I brought in the hips a little bit more, kind of bringing that in. So, and I think he was right, because it was really stiff through here and going back and forth. And I'm like, why am I just going to rotate at the thoracic? You know what I mean? So that tweaked it there a little bit. Has your dad tweaked it that way too? Does he? You don't know? He's like, yeah. So, yeah, we're changing stuff so many times, right? You can't keep up. It's because we're ahead of research. Yeah. What the heck was I going to talk about? I can't even remember what I was going to say now. All right, well, let's get to it. It'll come back to me. So it's tight rotation. It's the same thing as the gladiator twist. You hold the medicine ball. I just say stay in between your feet. So you go over this foot, but see, I want my hip and my shoulder to go together, and then this way, and then back and forth. First thing people want to do is they want to turtle up. So, stand proud. But you want this. You want that to get involved with it. Everybody wants to do that kind of stuff.
Pretty much want to stay stiff from the torso to the shoulder.
Yeah.
And then rotate more.
Yeah, exactly right. So it's that. And that's where good boxing comes in anyway. Like a hook. Or even an uppercut. Same thing.
Now, if you were to do that from the seated position, is there more?
I would not do it from a seated position. No. Why? Because it takes out the hips. And it's all on the spine. So, I'm glad you asked that. Because this goes into exercise selection. Because, we can do anything we want. And we always go, oh, well, why? Okay, well, that doesn't, I think anybody can find an explanation. You can always jump back to, well, it was fun, and it created a burn. Right? And that's actually kind of a good explanation for some people. So what I would say is we have to look at other factors. Safety, the physiology, the way the body works, what are you trying to accomplish, said principle. So what goal, so I look at it this way, from the said principle first, so safety should be first, but I'm going to go backwards just for right now. What goal, what life activity or sport activity, if we're looking at function as in a carryover to something, transfer, do we need to be able to sit on our ass and quick go back and forth side to side? Well, I think that's here, right? But not right. Yeah, so he's being a little sarcastic. So the first thing we go, not a lot of transfer there. All right? But we do have to do it from the feet with the legs involved. All right? Now, from a safety perspective, we look at it and go, wow, the hips are my most powerful rotators, and the legs to churn that force up through my torso. If I take them out of it, it's all on my spine. So now I look and I go, not a lot of transfer, potentially dangerous because I'm really hammering at one joint. I already got 2 strikes. Right? And here's the other thing. Then I just go, well, what other alternatives do I have? Can I still strengthen these muscles? Because that's the other thing. Well, in what I would believe is a more safer manner, and something that will likely have a better transfer, which is being up on your feet. Yes and yes. So my question to somebody doing that exercise, if you go through that checklist, why are you doing that? And if you say for fun, and I go, not good enough. Because this, why is down there more fun than standing up here?
If someone has like lower back pain, like chronic lower back pain, would you start them off slow still doing that?
We're going to talk a lot about back pain towards the end of this workshop, but I'm glad you said that because I don't have any of this kind of stuff addressed, and that's a great question. I'm abandoning all these. I'm abandoning all these. Well, you also, you go to what their physical therapist might say. The best thing there is anytime somebody has, first on, when somebody says they have back pain or back injuries, the first thing you ask them is, has this been diagnosed? And if they've just been going to a chiropractor for treatment, that's not necessarily a diagnosis. I mean, they've gone to a doctor, an orthopod, they've had MRIs, things like that. So if they've had a diagnosis, you want to find out what that diagnosis is. And if they used to go to a physical therapist, this is just covering your butt right now. Call, even if they went to the PT one time, call that PT up. Say, look, I know you haven't seen this person in 2 years. You may have their file, you may not. This is what, I read your notes, or they had some sheet that you gave them, or something. Can you help me? Tell me what you would do or not do this person. And if the physical and first off, it's going to be impressive to the PT if they're willing to talk to them. They should. Secondly, if you can, say, would you mind sending me on your letterhead, maybe do's and don'ts, or if anything, just the don'ts. All right? So good to get do's and don'ts. Why is that? Because if they get hurt doing something the physical therapist said, you go, here, I got letterhead saying that you're not the only one. You just say, I didn't just make this up. This is a little cover your butt tactic. I'm not saying it's guaranteed to have you win in court, but it helps. It helps. But you want to be extra cautious with that. So yeah, I wouldn't go to, and this other thing too, the average fitness client. So this is goal specific now. For the average, I classify clients in 3 ways. You have 2 ends, and the middle is everybody. Performance, that's a person training for a combine or a high-level golf tournament, or someone who's really, their main goal is to improve their athletic ability. And you have physique, that's a person who's going to model or get on stage for a competition. Everybody else in the middle is what I'd call the F3 client. Fitness, function, fat loss. That's mainly what they want to get. And they don't have a specific date in mind, or maybe it's like, I just want to look a little better for my wedding, if that's the date, but it's never this intense, I need to gain 10 pounds of muscle, by, or my coach needs me to bench 225 by the end of it. It's never like this strict. It's always like, I heard you were a good trainer, and I want to drop a little bit of this, just move a little bit. It's always this kind of vague things, because they want to have some fun. They want to, feel like they're sweating and moving their body. They want to look a little bit better. So that's the general. So when we look at that person, so if they play tennis a couple times a week or golf, maybe throw some of this stuff in there. I definitely would maybe throw something in there. Medicine ball throws are always a great one to go to. But I'm not going nuts with this. This is very minimal. Because when we look at it from a physique transformation perspective, which is probably number 1 goal, this doesn't have a huge role in that.
Because you can't really get it to be too high because you have a lot of reps.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw some of it in there, a little bit, a few minutes. But if they have back issues, then I got to be really conservative. So I'll probably take out all this type of stuff.
And
because you don't have to do it.
The question you got basically doing it is sitting down or not with medicine balls.
Mm-hmm.
You said, maybe that would work. I would do it, but wouldn't that work maybe do something like jiu-jitsu? You got a guy on top of you and you need to shift him one way, shift him
Yeah, and that's a common question. That's a common question. And here's my answer to that. And again, there's no way for anybody, and if there's anybody who really likes that exercise and anybody who's not, there's no way for anybody to win. I know you're not debating me. I'm just putting this out there because there's not something. That's another reason why science is great. Okay, you have an opinion, I have an opinion. Let's test this, and then let's put it into multi, because you have your biases and I have my biases, and everything else is just us rationalizing it. I rationalize it away, you rationalize it in, and we just come to this impasse and talk past one another. So sometimes you get in these debates and you realize it's just like, nothing's going to change. So with that little caveat, I'll say this. The way I approach it is I look at it and I go, how much force, how much in jiu-jitsu in that position, having been a very mediocre jiu-jitsu and wrestler guy, mainly a stand-up guy, do I really need when I'm in that position? It's mostly just me shifting my hips, but there's never a point. I know anybody who's a skilled jiu-jitsu player who's going, man, I'm just not strong enough to sweep a guy. It's all about leverage. You're getting underneath the guy. So that's not a point where force production is an issue. Does that make sense? It's, so that's the other thing you got to look at. When I'm looking at transferring force, throwing punches, dropping my level, picking up a dude, these are force production. But when it comes to certain things that just have to do with posture and position and technical work, I look and I go, I don't see why. Plus, because they spend so much time there anyway, I want to try to enhance the qualities that the sports are not, that can't be or not really well enhanced by just doing the sport all the time. Right? And that is such a low load, I'm kind of getting it anyway. Whereas here, I'm overloading my hands a little bit, or I'm overloading. That's different when just throwing light punches. That would be my thought process. I can't say that's right or wrong. So that's the tight rotation. I just pulled that off. I think that was actually an article for like a magazine that Brett Contreras wrote, and he used the exercise, so I just put it up there. So I showed you with the medicine ball, body weight, you can just keep your hands here and go quick. Another version, somebody grab me, Billy, can you grab me a barbell real quick? I got my whole toy chest starting to build now.
Olympic style?
Yeah, Olympic barbell real quick. I'll show you guys a cool version to do this with the landmine angle barbell setup. Check this out, guys. So you guys already know this one here, and you can know the stiff core. I'm not going to show you that. Check this. Go here, go shoulder to shoulder, quick. Try to keep that stiff. So look at the angle of my arms, 45. That's a little bit more. Then I can go here. I can try it here too. That's actually a little more lat. So the goal is just as fast as I can, back and forth. You got to try this one.
You showed me this last time.
Yeah. Come on.
Big guys do this. Just wreck them.
Yeah.
Again, you're staying tight through your core, right?
Yep. Good. Now stop. He's giving me a little of this. He's giving me too much arm. So just kind of, just take it side to side this way. Yep. Stable hips. Lock it in. Yeah. Look, throw the barbell side to side, not. Yeah. Yes, that's what I want. You can normally tell because people's face, they go like this, and all of a sudden you see them go. Everything.
Yeah. Made a big difference.
Tense.
Broke out
Yeah.
instant sweat.
It's the sprint face.
Yeah.
It's the sprint face. Why? It's the same thing. Everything. Yeah. When we're talking about core being the neck, watch the neck. Just come on. Everything around your spine.
Glad to get that.
Anybody else want to try that?
Dominic, birthday boy.
Yeah, he gets to do everything here, Billy. You can. So again, 8 to 10 second bursts. So look, zone it in first. Just kind of want to see the mechanics. Yeah. Good. Stop. Two arm dominant. Look, so this people do this. It's just here, not. Yeah. Good. Take it slow for a second. Yeah. And now pick up the pace, and then go. 5 seconds. 5. Stable here. He's starting to go back to those hands again. That's what happens. It's okay. That's better. 3. Come on. Now pick it up again. Now he's got it. 2, 1. Good. Good.
Love of God, breathe, man.
Yeah. Well, and people go, oh, you breathe. No, it's Valsalva maneuver. You can't.
But I mean, you can
Yeah,
feel
you
it.
really can.
When you lock it in right, you can feel it before you even
Yes.
move.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's sometimes you got to coach. Same thing with tight rotations. You know, people will do this. You know, but same thing with boxing. You got the Sonic the Hedgehoggers. You know what I mean? You want to teach them to go here. So that's okay. It happens. Thank you, guys. You just put that off to the side for my man. And big thing here is sprinting. I know selling you a trainer on sprinting is nothing new, but this gives you a new appreciation for it. And think about how many people have replaced these, you know, pushes, sleds, and just cut out their sprinting. Completely different motor patterns. Completely different motor patterns. Now, I will not stand here and say that I believe, and I think it kind of goes against common sense to think that a few sets or even a few months of doing sled pushes and things like that is going to make you forget how to sprint and teach your brain to forget, you know, how to. No difference than doing some leg extensions is going to make you forget how to walk or run. All right. And by the way, we do say these things. Oh, I'm not doing that because it's non-functional. I go, do you really think a few sets of curls and calf raises, your athlete's going to get off the machine and go, how do I walk again? You know what I mean? 15 years of football, and I've offset it in 2 weeks of leg extensions. I mean, we say this stuff like we really mean it. You know, so I don't think that's going to happen. But, again, we want to refine these types of reflexes as well. So what I would say goes back to this medicine ball thing. Sometimes a heavier ball to move a little slower, sometimes a lighter ball. Well, maybe one day you, instead of doing 2 sled days, you do 1 heavy sled day, which is be more accelerative type steps, and one day you go back to doing sprints. Because now that leg is building its momentum up. There is no momentum involved in pushing a sled. It's just.
What do you think about incorporating another day of like lateral co-joints and stuff?
Well, that's same deal. Same deal. Yeah. Some people call it lateral speed. I'd call it change of direction. Why? Because, again, that's just semantics. But the reason why I don't call it lateral speed is because when I think lateral speed, I think like going fast like this. You know, I mean, really what you're saying is you know, cutting just to go back linear again. So it's really change of direction. It's really change of direction. So that's important to bring in there. So quick review. Then we'll take just a quick, short bathroom break. So use these exercises to enhance the body's ability to summate force using all of its levers. That includes the torso along with the legs and arms. That's really what athleticism is. It's a load share. It's a load share. And also to match the force production patterns of fast sporting type actions. Now, I've heard the argument made, well, you can just grab the cable here and lift it up, and then if you want to get the reflexes on the other side, you know, the muscles that stop that, do it on the other side. I can't refute that by throwing out, you know, a research study and go, here, this has been looked at and been compared. But based on the said principle, I'd go, these are just different reflexes. Can I ever say that doing the heavy one is not going to help that at all? I can't say that, because lifting weights definitely helps performance. But I also think, why? Because athletes are also going out and running sprints and practicing anyway. Yeah, that's my thing. You know, anytime when people go, I love the argument. Single leg, I hear it all the time, single leg versus double leg training. I go, why are you arguing this? Do them both. I don't understand, you know. So I don't understand why when you do one, it says you can't do the other. I don't, you know. So, and I just kind of threw in a really nice research study. I don't remember if this was on the said principle or this was in about rotary force. I'll have to give you guys a reference list when this is done, but I like it. Directional. Oh, this was on the, I remember now, I got so many research references in here. This was on looking at is power direction specific. So it was kind of looking at the notion, does a lot of these linear type movements like Olympic lifts and trap bar lifts and heavy squats, does it carry over to force production that way in rotary sports? And it found out that obviously there's some carryover because a lot of it comes from the legs, but power is directional specific. So it's that both, you know, there's no black or white. We'll explore a little bit more of that later. But direction specific properties of power and agility, training should match the force production patterns of how athletes move in competition. So that's what it's saying. It's saying if you're doing rotation, then you should, in sport, then you should do some rotational type training, force production pattern, not the skill. I'm not loading the skill. I'm not putting a band at the end of the baseball bat. But I'm just looking at the force generation pattern that creates the rotation that drives the bat. That'll transfer into that skill. And to refine, just like you do plyometrics, to refine the Golgi tendon, the tendon reflex, not Golgi tendon, the tendon reflex, the myotatic reflex. You're doing this to refine that triphasic firing pattern. So, throw this in real quick. Because sequential kinetic linking, this is the one about the striking. This is actually called striking power, ... developing power to turn. I like this one. This wasn't a research study, but it was a research-based article that was in one of the strength conditioning, not the journal, but they have the magazine. That was in that one. So because sequential kinetic linking, that's multi-joint, plays such a vital role in rotational power, fundamental exercises that enhance trunk and core strength are essential for success. So we know that having some just general core strength does help improve the stiffness. Furthermore, ground reaction forces generated by the large muscles of the lower body provide a base of support to transfer that kinetic energy through the core. That's the transfer. That's why so many people, so many athletes gravitate towards powerlifting type workouts, and a lot of the functional trainers go nuts. Oh, it's linear base, but two of their main priorities is enhanced squat, enhanced deadlift. Well, most of your rotary power, which is a lot of sports, and sprinting and jumping, comes from your lower body. So I'm with them on the bench press. I wouldn't go nuts on the bench press. We'll talk about some research later that actually J.C. Santana did with Stu McGill. But in regards to beefing up that lower body, for sure. For sure. So provides a base of support to transfer kinetic energy through the core, resulting in more powerful kinetic linking. So we just talked about training the body as a whole and also training it segmentally to make sure everything can do its job, and then teaching it to work together. There's your movements, not muscles. I say train movements and muscles because muscles create the movements. Again, doing both. Core strength does have a significant effect, this is a research study, on an athlete's ability to create and transfer forces through the extremities. So what I'm doing now is I'm just backing up some of the things that I said, hey, this is kind of anecdotal, but it's not just anecdotal. There is some research. Keep in mind, it's not just transfer, there's also force creation. Well, you're just looking at, basically what you're saying is more complex than less complex, Because really, the way I look at it is this. When somebody first comes in regards to how I set up programs, I call it functional spectrum training. It's just organizing the session. I go, okay, I look at the whole body. Even if it's a lower body oriented day, we're still going to integrate the entire body, and then we're going to gradually narrow the focus to when we finish, it's going to be things like calf raises and hamstring curls. Whereas when we started, it's going to be things like squats where everything is involved. So all we're doing is we start here and then gradually, they both work. They're both really nice. So I'm just backing up there, putting some, the Credible Hawk, I always like that one. Always cites his sources. All right. You guys laughed after I flipped it off. All right, let's take a quick bathroom break, maybe get like a power bar. Lectures, workshops that I give is this one and program design, because that's the big one. What to do with it all. How to reconcile with all these different concepts and techniques, how to find a safe training direction, do I go crazy with the assessment and try to play physical therapist? Do I not need to do that? You know what I mean? So it's so much of it, you know what I mean? Unilateral, bilateral, three-dimensional, suspension, ball, traditional, do I lift heavy? Everybody's telling. So that's because you can't get that from conferences, you can't get that from YouTube, you can't get it from blogs, and if anything, all those education confuses you when it comes to program design. This one I put together just because core is such a hot topic. It's given such a special, magical, mysterious, I got to do this and everything. We were talking about that. We hear all these things. Breathe a certain way. Roll a certain way. Oh, it's not the strength, it's the timing. Oh, you draw this in. I mean, look at how we've changed in the last 30 years with just the core. First it was sit-ups. Then it was don't do sit-ups. Sit-ups will hurt you. Do crunches. No. Don't do crunches. You got to do draw in. do your drawing, and then you got to do a bunch of 3D stuff like sit on a ball and balance and be on an unstable surface. Then it was, don't get on the unstable surfaces because you can't, produce much force. Don't draw in and don't crunch. Now you have to brace. And now it's going through all this. Now it's breathing. So every few years we have a magic bullet type. There's always, magic people out there saying, we've got it now. And the other thing is move like a baby. You got to move like you did when you were a child. You know what I mean? And you guys have probably heard this stuff before.
Yeah, I definitely feel like we should be able to learn how to squat like we did.
Right, yeah, and that's a separate thing, but I could get more, we can maybe talk about that later when we get into the science. All I'm saying is if we look at this pattern, we would be very arrogant and we'd also be very naive to think that whatever we have now for the magic bullet is the right one, is better than the last magic bullet, because every year everybody still had common sense and we got lots of lectures on anatomically it made sense, and there was lots of different references to other therapists and other books and whatnot. By the way, none of these ever had really good research references. That's the first problem, and then they change and we go to the next thing. So if we pull away from that, I would say maybe stop jumping on the waves and look at what has stood the test of time across the board. So there's nothing wrong with maybe spending 5% of your session doing the it sounds pretty good, I really hope it works and I really want it to work stuff, but your client deserves at least most of their time, if not all of their time, doing stuff we all know works. Not the stuff that's so highly debated that and those are these little cues. Oh, draw in, no, breathe this way, no, roll this way. No, there is no definitive on any of that stuff. But the principle of overload never goes away. Said principle never goes away. Loading your, moving your muscles under load gradually never goes away. That builds up muscle density, accelerates we should focus on the to pardon a bad analogy in diet and fitness, but we should focus on the cake, not the icing. All right. Okay, so we talked about power for summation. Now we're going to talk about, is it raining out? Wow. All right. So strength now. So basically, now we're starting to get a little more traditional. What do we talk about? We have compound exercises in everything, multi-joint. And then we have isolation, or if you're not comfortable with the word isolation, targeted or less joints involved. Well, you can't technically pick up a pencil and use only one muscle. Okay, great. Some of them have a lot of joints, some of them have a few joints. Semantics, right? Yeah. So, but interestingly, we don't apply that same wisdom when it comes to core training. Right? So this is, basically I have two exercises that I'd put higher on the spectrum of priority. What I'd call compound core training, CCT, or core limited training, CLT. And then the targeted work. So for instance, if we're talking about back or pulling, this would be the chin up and lat pull down. This would be the dumbbell pull over, and rear delt fly or something like that. All right, or bicep curls. Simple as that. So I love to bring up this contradiction. I've put this in articles before. I always love it because if you catch yourself in a contradiction, before you're ever going to try to call BS on anybody, you got to first be willing to call BS on yourself. You really got to think about stuff. Why do I believe this? Does this line up with this? Am I intellectually consistent with this and this? Because if you can't be intellectually consistent, then you're wrong somewhere. So contradictions are a way to go, So here's one of the biggest contradictions. I used to say it. This is my story right here. Oh, I train movements, not muscles. Absolutely, I'm functional. I train movements, not muscles. Your brain only knows movements, doesn't know muscles. That's wrong. All your muscles have nerve interventions. If my brain didn't know muscles, I couldn't do that. It knows muscles and movements. So that's not physiologically correct, but you guys know where I'm getting. So, and I like to do integrated exercises before I do isolated, simpler exercises. Compound lifts before isolation lifts. But because the core is so important, we start each session with 5 minutes of core-specific work. How many times have you read that in books and seen trainers do that? That contradicts everything I just said right here. I always go, really, you do that? What movement is core? Since you train movements, not muscles. I go, core is a group of muscles. That's called muscle training. That's not called movement training. Inconsistent number one. And you do complex exercises, compound exercises, before you do simpler. Is it really complex to sit in a plank like this for 10 seconds or 30 seconds? You're doing that first, before squats, because you do it first, because it's the most important part. Now we're prioritizing body parts. How do you reconcile this with the other two things you just told me? What gives the core muscles special privilege? And if you believe the body only knows movements, then why are you just training muscles, by the way, in very artificial positions? Now, I'm not saying planks aren't good, but planks are the bicep curl to the core. I ask you, what is the lat pull down of the core? We're going to get into that. I just call full spectrum core strength. And you can apply this to any other muscle in your body, but this is a different lecture. We're going to focus this on the core. So full FSCT, full spectrum core training, just my little terminologies. Prioritizes core limited strength training and compound core exercise applications. So if we want to get specific, I don't prioritize with athletes or people who are interested in improving their general function to bench press. I still think it's a great exercise. I will still incorporate it. But I don't think it's one of the priority lifts. And this is one of the imbalances that I like to bring up that nobody talks about. We think muscle imbalances, we always think left to right or front to back. You know, we sit too much, so this is under length, this is short. Okay, great. But going back to some of the things we talked about earlier, I always ask people, can your torso, because we know it not only creates force, but it controls force, transfers force from the extremities, can your torso control, which is, it has to control it to transfer it, control the force your extremities can create? It's a real good question. Think about it. If you can lie on your back and bench 700 pounds, you don't need much of this. Yeah, I mean, if you're a power lifter, you're arching your back and you're really digging in there. Okay. But what happens when you're standing on your feet? And this is the limiting factor. Can you really tell me that someone can come at you right here with 700 pounds and you can stop it? No. So let's get into the bench press here a little bit. So again, I am not downing the bench press. I wrote an article about this called Truth About the Bench Press, and of course everybody, people straw man you, and it's funny how people reduce everything. Like I said 4 times, still use the bench press, but here's why I don't think it's a priority lift. The squats and deadlifts, yes, but still use it. Here's a program with the bench press and the first questions. Why do you hate the bench press? Why do you say the bench press is bad? I'm only responsible for what I say, not what you hear, Well, we're going to get into that. This is just not my opinions. This is just physiology and physics. So this is a research study actually done by J.C. Santana and Stuart McGill's lab, and one of Stuart McGill's guys was published in 2007. Basically, they did a comparison of the bench press with a standing one-arm press. They kept it horizontal, split stance, but they kept the forces this way, because people say, well, you're going to be really strong if you lean like this and whatnot. Yes, but that's not matching the bench press movement. And you actually think if you're standing and pressing double, the reason why they use the one arm standing is you're actually stronger here. If you had something pulling you back, you have less center, but here you can really bear down with this. So that's why they compared 2 and 1. So anyway, I highlighted 2 big findings that I think are really, really important. The model predicted, once they did all the mathematics, that pushing forces from a standing position under ideal mechanical conditions, and I'm going to stop right there because I've talked to JC about this. What that means is provided you have good stiffness here, no extra moving parts, because if you're like this and wobbly, then you're leaking force out. So this is the fittest people, the people that can lock it in and really drive. So under ideal mechanical conditions, pushing forces from your feet are limited to 40.8% of the subject's body weight, not of the subject's bench press, of the subject's body weight. Which means, if you weigh 100 pounds, I know not too many people weigh 100 pounds, but I'm easy on the math. With a minor split stance, upright, pushing like this, 40.8 pounds it takes to start to push you off of your center before you have to reset and lower your center or change some things. Now, let's apply this to something real world here. We're all football fans here, hopefully, or if you're not a big fan, at least you've seen football games. You can't go anywhere without seeing the NFL. All the linemen that protect the quarterback, the offensive linemen, they're supposed to just be big mountains that are hard to get around and hard to push over. Big bodies. Most of them, if not all of them, are obese. They're athletic, but they're still obese. Because the NFL has figured out many years ago that it's much better to have a 300-pound dude who can bench press 500 pounds, somebody trying to push him over, than a 250-pound or a 200-pound dude who can bench press 700 pounds. Why? Because it all comes down to that right there. 40.8% of 300 pounds is more than 40.8% of 200 pounds because you don't have something holding you back, supporting your back. But they're not necessarily worried about getting pushed off their feet. That's more technical stuff. So look at what a lot of the NFL strength programs are. A lot of trainers, it drives them nuts. They get in there, and I've consulted with teams. I'd go in there, and it's hammer strength stuff, and it's all this machines, and a lot of the 3D trainers just they're just like, oh my God, there's no 3D work on it. And I go, these guys already have functional training happening more than you could ever give them. It's called football practice. What are they not getting? Remember we said you want to train the things that you don't get? What are they not getting in practice? They're getting their speed, they're getting agility, they're getting the 3D movement. They're not getting the real body armor and the size to make them harder to push over. Because the stronger they are, the more platform they have to be able to explode from. I gave you there's some program design in that.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you would replace cable press with the bench press?
Well, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that.
Like you miss out.
No, I didn't say replace. The word was replace. Use them both. You're my king of saying using them both. Use them both. For an athlete, when I'm looking at strength gains as a benchmarker, like people use deadlift and squat, my benchmarker is one arm push up. Well, actually, we'll get to them.
Okay.
We'll get to them. That's where we're coming. That's where we're going with this. So we got some powerlifter who I don't know. There's Arnold, and there's Rocky doing a one arm push up. So basically, this takeaway from this, and then we're going to get into application. Unless you're a powerlifter or training for a bench press competition / combine test, the bench press us is just another compound exercise application. Certainly not magic, as a lot of people want to deem it to be. It's just a great way to strengthen chest, shoulders, and triceps. To me, I put it in the same category as dumbbell press. I don't really give it this special, type movement. Squats and deadlifts, I give them the movements, right? Because they have a lot of force transfer to anything, raising and lowering your center of gravity. That transfers to everything, from a fitness person, mom picking up her baby, to exploding into someone, to running faster. So to me, that's functional for anybody. Functional meaning transfers into a goal. If your goal is to look better, that'll give you a great looking lower body. If your goal is to move better, there's nothing that has more carryover than raising and lowering your center of mass. All right. But here's the big takeaway. These two movements are limited not by the lower body. Nobody, unless you're going light and you're doing sets of 20 and burnouts and things like that, nobody finishes squats and goes, I can't, my legs, or especially deadlifts, nobody goes, my hamstrings are on fire. No. Number 6, and then, done. Back couldn't handle it anymore. Same thing with squat. Everything looks good, and then there's number 6. Nope, done. Unless you want to herniate a disc. All right? Okay, so I like those because, to me, I'm not creating an imbalance. As soon as this doesn't have it left anymore, as soon as this is, I can't control the force that these are putting out, stop. Now, I've heard there's other coaches that talk about this and say, well, that's why we go to split stance, rear foot elevated, because we want to take the core away, and that way we can, really strengthen the hammer and strengthen the legs without having to use this, because this is where everybody is losing it. I like that approach in a group setting because I feel it's safer, because a lot of people do get hurt, they go too heavy, so sometimes you got to make do with what you got. But I worry if in a setting where I have more control, 3 people training or a private situation, that then I might be creating an imbalance there, because now I'm building these tremendous leg, force production capability from the legs, but not teaching this to be able to control it, because it's got to come up through here or this way. I worry about that. So I think I do them both. But the reason why a lot of coaches don't like squats and deadlifts, because of that limitation, that's exactly why I like them. That's exactly why I like them. Yeah. Because as you get stronger, this gets stronger with it. So now you have a balance between what this can control and what these extremities can create. So again, feel the best core exercises or core training is infused with pushing, pulling, squatting, movements, and that's based on the set principle. One arm push-up, that's a crappy form. This is, girl used to work at IHP, but Jessica, right? Rio? Jessica. I had her do a one-arm push-up the way I think it looks good. But there's a lot of people who are big benchers that couldn't dream of doing a one-arm push-up. So is it the strength of their chest, shoulders, and triceps? Because this, and we talk about rotational training, you go, well, that's not rotary training. She's not rotating, but gravity is taking this shoulder and trying to go whoop and trying to rotate her down to the floor. And she's resisting that. That is a 3D movement. I always tell you, it's like the air. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. This is limited through here. That's what normally, and if you have this, as long as this can outlast this, you get 3, 4, 5, and you just go, my arms just can't do it anymore. That's great. I want your core to have more endurance than your extremities do.
Now what about like a standing military press to replace the bench?
That would be compound core for sure. Yeah. Core for sure. That now we're thinking the same. So where would I put that in the priority? That movement and the movement you just said, I would prioritize, and then maybe the next tier would be bench, and then after that would be flies and triceps and things like that. Do them all. Just saying, if they all have benefits, how do you put them together without them interfering with one another? And if the goal is function and performance enhancement, that's how I would go. They all have their benefits, All right, so we're going to get right to it. You guys all know Deanna. This is one of my soon-to-be pro bodybuilders, Alex. His wife is a pro IFBB pro figure. They were in the back DVD. So we'll talk about a couple of these real quick. So for pushing, these would be the top compound core training at CCT or core limited training, because not all of them are limited through the core. Like a squat and deadlift is limited. That's what gives up first. Some of them, like a uppercut, the core is not, or like an overhead press. Normally it's not the core that gives up first, but this is heavily involved. It's heavily involved with it. So that's why I say compound. All right, so push-ups for sure, not as much as one-arm push-ups, but any push-up variation. A push-up is a plank where your arms are moving. So I always tell people, I go, if you can do push-ups, why are you doing planks? Because you just did them doing the push-ups. I mean, you really did. You hold your spine stable, and you're going, this is staying stable. All you're doing is holding this, now you got your arms moving.
What about like training endurance of your spine? Like after you've already fatigued your body?
Well, if you're using it as a targeted thing, no different than you're using it as you go over to do your lat pull down and then you do some pullovers. A plank would serve as that purpose. Right. So I'm not saying you don't do it. I'm saying why, if you feel like you have to, just understand you've already got that training effect that's already been there. Everything else you're doing is just extra. It's just extra. One-arm cable press. I have a video, actually one with JC and one myself, talking about how to do that. I will say this though. If you're going to do a one-arm cable press, go heavy with it. Oh, here it is. And use, I'll show you this real quick. Rio, we're cool if I use this right here, right? All right. So first problem is, when you do this exercise with clients, it's this right here. This is, you guys are all shaking here. Yeah, I know. My clients hate that. They come in, oh my God, look, I know, believe me. So you take a strap. I got this from my friend Sorenex, but you get different straps. Fish it through here. This has got 2 loops. That goes here. Now look. Comfy. That's number one. Now, let's get to the real business of working hard. I might have to experiment with the weight here a little bit. This is strength training. This is my always I hear people go, oh, I'm doing functional strength training. They got like a yellow band. They're like, and I go, well, I like where your heart is at. You know, you're on your feet. You got the guys like, but I don't see the strength part happening. I see movement. I don't see any overload happening here. How do you get stronger without overload? So the approach to this is no different than if you're going to do a heavy kettlebell get up. You don't grab the kettlebell like this, just be lying on my back and go like this, because if the kettlebell is light enough for you to internally rotate it, it is certainly not heavy enough to challenge you doing your get up. So if this weight is light enough that you can go like that, it is certainly not heavy enough to challenge you here. So that's the first thing. You got to treat this heavy. So my goal here is not to give myself a workout, but I got to give some sort of weight to show you what I'm getting at. So the way I set this up is I say put the band to your forearm, bring the forearm into the body. This locks it in tight, just supports it so it doesn't go wah, it's out like that. Drive yourself out, still not heavy enough. Set up, then go. And I should see if it's heavy enough. You should be, struggling. Now, because I'm limited by I only have so much body weight, I do want you to lean forward slightly. Why? Because if you go straight up, now it's all here. Plus, if you lose it, now you go to, we're not going to fall back. Now you're going to extension and rotation. That's not good on your vertebrae, facets mainly. So I want to get you forward so you can get a little center mechanical advantage on it and rock it.
That's how you use it in sport.
Yeah. So going heavy there, you're normally going to get six or above. Because anything below that, the weight, you can't get the weight out. You're just like, you get to that point. So then when you bring it back, so let's say I finish my set, I go here, lock it in tight, pull it, and then bring it back. Just a little safety. So same wisdom as you see with the kettlebell get up. I like that option. If I had to tier the three, my top one arm push up, that would be if I had to say king of upper body pushing, that's what I'm saying is the king. I really like as an alternative the angled barbell landmine press, 90-degree angle forearm to the bar. You got an angle this way, so push-ups are more here. This is this way. It's a nice mix. Tremendously core involved. You put enough weight on that, man, the whole time it's pulling you that way. So I like that. Now, we talked about core. You were talking about core endurance. Well, imagine if I do 5 sets of this, both sides. Then I had, also in that same workout, I did some chin-ups, and then I did some push-up burnouts. Every exercise I have done so far has been infused with this. The core endurance is built in. It's built in. Anything else is basically that extra, it's the arm work, it's the shoulder work. It's just to create a little bit more overload. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't see anything wrong with that. Overhead presses, we got that in there. Dumbbell or barbell. Dumbbell uppercuts, I got a video on this one. You hold them like this, turn, and press. You don't turn this way because then the dumbbell wants to go down. You still got to go here. Shoulders and hips rotate together. You can get a little dip and drive on that one if you want. Love that one. So that would be my first go-to if someone can't do one-arm push-ups.
You would do that as your program before you have some heavy bench press.
Yeah. Now, if it's a physique type athlete, then I'm going right to bench press type stuff, obviously. But their goal isn't going heavy anyway. Their goal is just to get a nice pump and put on muscle mass, not necessarily force development. So this would be a benchmark. A lot of people keep wanting to go back to a trap bar deadlift or a vertical or whatever, and they keep wanting to go back to that. For a pushing benchmark, this would be one, or one-arm push-ups would be one, depending on where you start. To keep going back to is the primary. I put these in the category for pushing as I put squats and deadlifts.
You also get a lot of more movement in the scapula too.
Hmm?
Another nice benefit of that of those is the movement in the scapula compared to just sitting in a press. If you watch the scapula, it moves a lot more.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And we're talking about, it's funny because now we're really training the body as a unit. This is a total body press. One arm push-ups is a total body press. You know, you get the spiral line or Serape effect or whatever label you want to put on that. Pulling. Bent over rows for sure. Any sort of dumbbell row, you're limited, involved through here. I love that. You got to hold that position. If I do 12 rows, 1 second in, 2 seconds out, 3 seconds per rep, 3 times 12, 36. That's 36 seconds of static endurance I've got here. We don't think about it like that, but it's exactly what you're doing. Most of this stuff gets the rotation and a little bit of front, rotational lateral. Most of this stuff gets the back. That's a one-arm freestanding row. Actually, Rio took this awesome picture. He was getting a little artsy on me with the angle, but it looks like this here. And again, that's a 3D movement because gravity is trying to do this to me, so I have to resist that to maintain shoulder position. And when my shoulders rotate, my hip wants to jut out, so now I've got transverse and frontal plane activation there. So if you're into the 3D stuff, it's there. It's absolutely there. And that sometimes, again, a little program designing, but sometimes I'm all for moving in multiple directions. But don't do it because you just think you have to. Don't forget, it's already infused. Sometimes I see people doing stuff, side lunge with a lean this way, and I go, who does that? And they go, this functional. I go, for what? You know what I mean? Like if you and I are out camping and you twist your ankle, I'll carry you back. Hop on. I go like this. Get on. I go, man, that might be general mobility training with some light load, but I don't see that transferring into anything.
Now, would you scale somebody, have them hold on to something, or would you always want them to be freestanding on the bent over rows?
Oh, well, you could do a three-point stance as well, but I like the freestanding because you have more that you're doing. Yeah, most people can get that. The hang up there would be if they just can't get the back position. Some people just aren't built. Some people just can't create this disassociation. And I'm not saying it's just a bad thing. I think some people just don't get it. It's not built to it. You guys have all done that. We all want everybody to do RDLs or some sort of deadlift. Some people just aren't built for it. We've been there. And you go, bend at your knees, and they go like this, and you go, no, hinge at your hip, like this. No, bend at your knees, like this. And you go, and then after a while, you're like, never mind. By the way, your rate just went up $10 an hour. You know what I mean? All right. Yeah. Well, some people aren't built for that. Maybe go wider stance and go here, but you fit the exercise to them versus try to fit them to the exercise. All right. That's why I have variety here. One-arm cable rows. That's with the cable lined up, at an angle, even with me, but pulling this way. That's a tremendous. So that would be if the cable's here. Tremendous rotational force. I like split stance. I know this is nothing new. Split stance if I have it in my left hand, left foot back. Why? Because when I split my stance, I can have a lot more strength. If I go like this, it just wants to pull me forward. So now I got a little bit of leg. I got to root this into the ground. So now I got this hip to this shoulder happening. There's the back. What's the one-arm push-up? This sort of this hip in the front. So everything here, this is infused in there. One-arm compound rows. Might as well bring this down. Here I'm a fitness guy, too lazy to put the arm back down. So this is just a one-arm row here I was talking about. A compound row, again, I want a split stance, would be, hinging at the hip. Look at the back position. And then as you come up, you pull. Hinge at the hip, come up and pull. Man, you want to feel this glute? It's all through here, this shoulder, yeah. Here. Yeah. That's a nice one. It's a compound row. Motorcycle row is just staying down there. You're just here. That's also nice if you want to create a lat pull down type movement and you don't have a lat pull down. And I wrote that split stances. Split stances, you have much more, you widen your base of support. You're more stable. More stable, you can deal with more load.
Same arm, same leg. Arm back.
Yeah. So if I'm doing presses, if the cable's in my right hand, the strongest position is right leg back. If I'm doing pulls, same thing. Strongest position, because I have this contralateral thing happening here. So like I told you, most of these exercises you guys are very familiar with. Maybe you didn't appreciate them or maybe you didn't organize them in this way, this thought process. Or maybe you just think of them as just one exercise in any number of exercises. But when I'm choosing exercises in the vast array of the toolbox, look and I go, okay, what's going to give me my biggest bang for my buck here? And what also fits with what I think is going to carry over most? These are what make the most sense. So this is what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on. Everything else, it just gets less from there. Rotation. Yes, the rows were rotational. Yes, the one-arm pushes were rotational. You could say that. But these are actually so that would be where you're kind of resisting rotation. A cable chop, this is actually a former backup to Todd Heap, Ravens tight end. Poor guy had like 10 knee surgeries. His surgeon really screwed him up, and then he kept, other surgeons tried to make up for what the other surgeon did wrong, and it just was a problem. He was doing plate chops, but you just hold a weight plate. And you put some, come up here, really shift. You want to make sure people's back is here, they're not like this. Man, grab a 45-pound plate and do that. Don't go slow because it's a shoulder exercise. Go like you're going to throw. I say it's like you're baling hay. Pretend you're going to throw it in the truck, dead stop, and pull it back. That exercise is no joke. No joke. That's what plate corkscrew, plate chop. The dumbbell plank row. Some people call it a renegade row. I don't need, you guys are all like, duh, I got it. Here's the thing. I see people doing this, so I'm pretending I have dumbbells in my hands. I see people doing it. Watch the hips. This is what I see. No. Say to your client, I just put my dinner plate on your back. Don't spill the dinner. Big difference. Yeah, because I see people in these YouTube videos, and people got 60-pound dumbbells in their hands, and they flip their hips. Well, sure, all your body weight, half of that's just pulling the weight up there just because most of your center of gravity's over. Not good enough. And I don't call it plank row. One of my clients years ago, she had been training me for years, 4 days a week, and I said, we're going to do renegade rows, and she goes, what are you talking about? And I show her. She goes, what's renegade about this? And I went, you're right. And I went, plank row. I was like, I like how you think, We already talked about the cable press. And one-arm farmer's walk. Just grab a heavy, heavy dumbbell, stand up tall, and walk. Now, I say lateral, not walk lateral. I'm just saying the title is rotation, and this is mainly a lateral resistant. I said that to offset the potential nerd who would be me in the audience that would go, that's not rotational, that's lateral resistance. That would be me. So I put that on there like, yes, Marty Pants, I know.
What about with the lunge? Wouldn't that still be
Well, same thing. Right there. Yeah, we're going to get there. Yeah. See? But I like how you think. I love that. Just grab a real heavy weight, stand up, walk with it. There's your side plank. Plus you got glute med happening there because the gravity is doing this. This leg right now is adducted, which means my abductors have to work to pull me back. This leg is adducted, which means my abductors have to work to center me. It's already there. It's already there. As heavy as you possibly can go. And if grip is the limitation, hold it here. With one part of the dumbbell resting on the shoulder, the other one here. Now grip is not a factor. And what I like to do with clients when they think they're going to go, oh, my hands are getting tired. They've been doing it 30 seconds. That's no problem. Pull it up to your shoulder. Keep walking. And you're like, oh. So for lower body, RNLCOM, that's not a website. I just mean raising and lowering your center of mass. Barbell squats. Limited and involved through here. I know you're going, wait, what the heck? But I think some people, they think that stuff isn't functional. You know what I mean? This traditional stuff. It really is. And you talk about core training, that is severe. Again, we're not thinking of core as abs. We're thinking of core as the entire part. So if we did farmer walk, we got the lateral. If we do squats and deadlifts, we got the back. If we do one-arm push-ups, I just did a lower body, a pull. Now we've got some rotation on a little front. What's left? Some of this kind of stuff we can add in. Or like that's where we bring in planks or knee tucks with the ball. whatever. So I'm also thinking about it in that way too. 3D. Little for this, little for this, little for this, little for this. One-arm lunges. You go, one-arm lunges? You mean one-leg lunges? No. Instead of holding 230s, hold 150, and then do your lunges. And again, hold it up here so grip's not a limiting factor. Now, I don't know if you guys, I know, again, this is nothing crazy new, but if I'm doing them, I always like to go opposite. So if I'm doing a walking lunge and the weight is in, my huge weight here, if the weight's in this side, I'm going left leg, and I'm doing the whole way that way. Because if you go right and right, it's just really awkward. It's just really awkward. Yeah, I mean, if you like it, it's fine. And I'm not against it, but if I want to get that ipsilateral, I'll do other stuff for that. Right? If I'm going reverse lunges, again, I'm not saying it's wrong at all. It's nice to mix it up. You can't go as heavy, though. If I'm stepping backwards, then I step back with this leg, so I still end up the same place. Where I might do same side is go lighter and, higher rep type stuff towards the end. Deadlifts, dumbbell, barbell, trap bar. Front squats, Zercher squats. You guys know Zercher squats in the elbows, right? Yeah. Crazy through here. Crazy through here. Quick little tidbit, you should already know this, but like I always just like to say stuff, it's always good to just reinforce it. High bar back squat is going to be more upright torso, it's going to be a little more quad oriented. Low bar squat is going to jut your torso more forward, that's going to be more low back, glute, and hamstring oriented. So we talked about hybrid. I talked about animal patterns, and I just found that because I thought it was funny. Like, zebras hanging from trees. It's just a random picture that entertained me. Turkish get-ups. You guys already know Turkish get-ups. I will tell you that I'm not a big fan of doing the entire get-up because I'm really looking at it as this shoulder-hip thing. So I only like to do it to the point where you just end up kind of on your rear end. So I'm not going to do the perfect get-up right now, but basically if we're doing it, here, 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 and then back down. I don't like to do the all the way up. Because all the way up to me is just the lower body at that point. Because the weight's stacked up above it. And I'm going, if I'm trying to overload the lower body, I'm doing lunges and I'm doing a weight appropriate for that. Now, if you're trying to do it from a metabolic standpoint at the end of a workout as a finisher, and I'm all for that. But my focus here is looking at it as core-oriented strength training where I can really overload this shoulder and hip complex.
Yeah, because you have to go a lot lighter.
There you go. There you go. So, cable tight chops. This is nothing new. So I'll just take a second on it. All it really is doing is, instead of doing this huge, movement, this is really heavy, but, way over here, there's no resistance at this point. Just staying here to here, here to here. And then the same thing as if it's middle, just keeping the tension in the center. Because when you're here, it's just pulling me rounded. I'm not doing anything at this point. And then when I'm over here, it's pulling me straight backwards. If you're trying to do rotation, I'm staying in this zone so the tension is on me the whole time. And I have a rotary workshop where we talk about loading and shifting, but another time. Animal pad, this is like a really hot thing right now. I mean, if anybody wrestled, I did this stuff, wrestling, crawling around in different ways, doing this stuff, and alligators, and sideways, and all these things. I think it's really cool stuff. I like to do it as a warm-up or either as like metabolic stuff at the end. Why? Because the load is low. You got to go high volume. But it involves the hips and shoulders moving together. It's not like staying in one place. And really what you're doing is you're doing dynamic planks. It's planks but subtle changes. It's funny how stuff changes names. We've gone from, it used to be called calisthenics. Then it was body weight. Then it was, animal patterns. Now it's primitive patterns. And I go, primitive? Like primitive man? Like, I don't remember primitive man crawling on his hands. We still walked. You know what I mean? Like primitive like a baby? And I always ask, well, why are you moving like a baby? Move like an adult, So, it's like, Yeah, like, ever watch a baby run? They run like little drunk guy. Like you think you're gonna move like that? All right, so I'd like to throw in some science here. This is an interesting study. I actually just did an article based off of this study for a magazine. The activation of the abdominal and lumbar muscles was the greatest during exercises that required deltoid and gluteal recruitment. Distal areas. What are all those exercises that we just look at? Then they compared those to the focused ones, like the crunch and the sit-up, or stuff like that. An integrated routine that incorporates the activation of distal trunk muscles would be optimal. And they went on to say for trunk stability and strength and performance. So it's cool, and some of us would look at our head and go, yeah, come on, I knew that. But sometimes, how many times have you, well, soon you'll find out, how many times have you thought you knew something and you read a study and you go, that doesn't work. That's wrong. You know, well, you're going to find some of those, a lot of them actually. I know I did. But it's nice to go, yeah, okay. Have some validation there. All right, targeted ab exercises. So this is we just talked about from a core perspective, this workshop is about core training. We just covered our multi-joint. Now we're going to cover our more focused, our bicep curls for the torso, or our triceps extensions essentially. I think those are still okay to do as well. And really, notice I've changed the wording from core to abs. Why? Because we talked about the core as the entire torso. Yeah, I haven't got to neck yet, but we're going to get to that, which is not going to be a big focus, I promise you. But when I broke it down, when we're doing lots of the lower body stuff, lunges, squats, deadlifts, it's mostly, if you're going unilateral weight, it's here. And if you're going bilateral, it's mostly this aspect of the core. If you're doing a lot of pushing type stuff, it's mostly rotary type stuff. But we still haven't done a lot just basically for the abdominals themselves, right? So that's what we're going to add in there. You're not going to see a lot of specific back extensions or a lot of things like, because it's already kind of in there. So I'm trying to do things we didn't do. And if you're not into the flexion-based stuff, you don't have to do it. So we use target ab exercises to give us what the other stuff didn't, plain and simple. Why train muscles? Because this is what we're talking about right now. Well, I look at it as this way. Your nervous system, this is my little oversimplification, and I emphasize oversimplification. You know, your nervous system and your muscles are not mutually exclusive. That's why we say neuromuscular recruitment. They're not mutually exclusive. However, if we had to really simplify it, I always say this. Your nervous system is the director. It's what puts it all together. So what your nervous system is really good, that's the movement stuff. That's the software. That's what helps you coordinate everything. What helps you utilize multiple levers in a nice synergistic, smooth flowing pattern. Multiple levers, either vertically, diagonally, or horizontally. What your muscles do, those are each of the levers. What they do is three things: produce, reduce, and control force. That's isometric, concentric, eccentric. If you get all those good at working, or you get all your employees good at doing their job, they make a strong team as long as the boss knows how to make them work together. So when everybody looks at hypertrophy and bodybuilding, they go, it's non-functional training. It'll make you less athletic. What will make you less athletic is if you don't do athletic stuff. You can still bodybuild and then go out and play tennis 5 times a week, and you will remain athletic. Why? Because you're doing athletic stuff. So it's not that hypertrophy and isolation training and machines make you less functional, so to say. It's that if all you do is single-dimensional, single-joint type exercises is what makes you less athletic. So we've hit the bullseye of the wrong target on that one. Football players are the best example. Most of the stuff they do is powerlifting and bodybuilding. And they become more athletic every year because they get bigger, and then they do their 3D stuff out on the football field called practice. So I kind of covered this already. The core limited training or the compound core training is mostly anti-rotation type training and lateral. So we integrated some target work mainly for the anterior torso. Now, I'm not going to get into this crunch debate. You guys have been witness to this for 4 years now with coach versus coach debates, you know, and all this stuff. And there's been research papers written. I personally think, you may think I'm biased because they're my friends, but they're my friends because I like how they think. Brad Schoenfeld's paper and Brett Contreras' paper, To Crunch or Not to Crunch, you know, really addressed this from a scientific perspective. I think they pretty much covered it. So I don't do crunches, not because I think they're going to make your spine herniate or anything like that. And even Stu McGill never said that that's going to happen. He even come out and said that. He says he still proposes there's better ways to strengthen your core. The whole lecture I've proposed the same thing. I don't like them because I think they're too damn easy. Any exercise that a beginner can go, let me put these burritos down and give me 50. And first day out can just bang out 50 reps. That exercise is too easy. That's what I'm doing. So if we're going to do flexion stuff, and again, if you have back problems, especially disc herniation, this stuff is out. This stuff is out. But I do not think that they're going to make your spine blow up. And I've looked at the evidence, and there is lots of evidence that shows you can adapt and build discs stronger as long as you don't go to end range. It's generally the same thing. You don't do chest flies with your shoulder like this. You may stretch that way, but you don't overload it. You don't go to end range. You stay in controlled ranges. Same thing with your spine. You can stay in controlled range. It's built to move. It's built to move as long as you don't go to end range. And that stuff they did with the pig spine and the flexion machine, that was gone to full end range repeatedly. And by the way, a pig cervical spine is just like a human lumbar spine. Even a back surgeon would not know the difference if they weren't told, if they were looking at the two. So when you hear that, you go, oh, it's a pig spine, who cares? No, that's not true. They're pretty similar. The problem is it was banged to end range, and there's also no active muscles around. Of course, it was a dead spine. But what about mid-range? So people took that number and they go, oh, it burnt out at whatever, 12,000 cycles, so that must mean our human spine burns out. Well, no, first off, not going to full range. Secondly, we're not doing all at one shot. Third, there's no muscles around that thing. So that's when you got to be careful with research, because that's just observational research just to put some data on something. People ran with that data, but those are the people who don't understand science. That's not strong evidence. They made it very strong evidence. Hence where all this debate came from, and why Stu McGill, who knows science, is going back and going, well, I didn't say that. You said that. You know. All right, so for now, you guys are getting ready to crucify me. I know. He says upper and lower. There is no upper. There is no blue and green abdominals like on the anatomy chart. I will get to that. I know that. And we'll get to that. So Swiss ball plate crunches, getting a stretch, or reverse crunches. I will go over those in a little bit. Now, I kind of addressed this here. It really comes from where the the prime area of movement is coming from. If you're contracting from the bottom up, the force is mostly coming from the bottom up, which means it's being dissipated the further you go up. So yes, your abdominals do work as like a light switch. When one is on, all are on. However, the point of maximal loading is being dissipated up the chain because of where the movement is being initiated from. Does that make sense? If you go from top to bottom, which is like a ball sit-up, then it's initiating from here and it's being dissipated down. It's no different than the activation curve, I would say, doing a deadlift on your glutes where they're stretched here, where this is the hardest and this is the easiest when they're shortened, to doing a hip thrust where this is the easiest and this is the hardest. Make sense? They're still on, but in different positions. This is where they're contracting at maximal, this not so much in the hip thrust. In the deadlift, this is where they're contracting or trying to work at maximal. This is where they're more relaxed. That's what I'm getting at with this. Okay. So I don't really need to show you guys, plate crunches, reverse crunches. I'll take that back. I'm not going to take anything for granted here. Let me go over this real quick. Hang tight. Let's get a ball. Just in case I maybe have some little tidbit that you may find interesting. So here's how I coach it up. If it's already what you're doing, great. Then you're in good company, and I'm in good company too. So I say tailbone stays in contact with the ball. Of course, I don't want the head going forward like this. Just a little stretch here. If you want to make it a little tougher, go hands above. The way I coach is I say you have point A, point B. Get them as far apart as you can without extending, without straining, And then when you come up, try to bring them as close together as possible, and then extend them. Some people do all hip flexion. They just come right up. That's hip flexors. And I don't care if you strengthen your hip flexors. That's fine. They're not going to, that's part of that chain as well. So, but I am looking for a flexion moment, not a hip flexion moment. In regards to reverse crunches, again, this is actually works like the opposite of overload. It's like a spot. You want to find a weight, the lightest weight you can hold above you. I don't let people, this is the first thing people want to do. They want to jolt like that. You've seen that before. So I say heel to butt, knees in, cannonball. That basically disadvantages the hip flexors. No jolting, and I say just pull. Right to there, down slow, one vertebrae at a time. And the less counterbalance I need here, the more I'm using here. So the progression is eventually get to nothing. It's way tougher. Now, the heels move a little bit, that's fine, but you don't want your client to go like that, because now it's just the weight of my legs. Those are much harder than you might think. Much harder than you might think. Sip of water here for a second. Again, if you're in the camp where you think flexing the spine is somehow a problem and evil or whatever, don't do it. Plenty of other exercises. Plenty of other exercises. I do want to do a little demonstration here, though. So, one of the, and I've said this a lot, and I've seen a lot of my friends and colleagues who are quite bright. You may have heard this before or even done this analogy with your clients. So everybody stand up. It's real basic. You've probably heard, we have anatomy and then we have functional anatomy, And I go, all anatomy is functional, unless it's dead. So one of the things that people say is they go, oh, well, the rectus abdominis, it says in all the books, flexes your spine, right? Flexes your trunk. And then the functional people go, well, stand up, put your hands on your abs. So go ahead, put your hands in your abs. Now flex forward. Abdominals don't turn on. What turns on? Oh, the back to decelerate you. So this is used as the reason why. Well, so it's not functional to do this because that's not what your abs do in function. Okay, I give you that when gravity is giving it to you for free when you're just moving very slow. However, now you're a boxer. You don't have to put your hands up, but get an athletic stance. Now, put at least one hand on your abdominals, if not two. Now, when I say go, and I'm going to say it real fast, pretend someone's throwing a punch right at your forehead, and you have to either side or duck it out of the way fast and return. You ready? Go. Bang. Big time. So, your abdominals absolutely work from a standing position to flex your spine when you need to move faster than gravity will take you there. And when does that happen? Right there. Right there. And actually, I wouldn't recommend, you got to be a real good boxer to be able to duck punches like that. Most guys will just, just slip. I'm pretty confident to do that. Anyway, you guys can sit down. So, yes, I agree with this whole thing. But if I need to stop and cut, even that is working. So, when I look at a specific adaptations, a SAID principle, and I got a fighter who needs to be able to go like this, tighten. I am absolutely doing this stuff based on the SAID principle. Period. I'm going to overload that because I know if I want to get you better at doing this, I load that pattern. If I want to get you better at doing this, I load that pattern too. I am not taking dumbbells and going like this. I'm not banging you at end range. I'm staying in mid-range. And I'm not just going to do isometrics. Why? Because you're not just doing isometrics. You are creating movement. So I'm basing that on the SAID principle. And I'm also basing it on the general rule of joints. You stay in mid-range, you're probably a lot safer. So if you're looking for some efficacy there, I would. That's my general point of view on that one. I don't know if you can make out the faces. That's Robert Downey Jr. and the guy who played the Hulk from the Avengers. Obviously we're two scientists. So, like this one. I wrote several articles about this one, but I actually know this guy, Escamilla. He and I sat next to one another at a spine symposium a couple years ago after I wrote this article, and I looked at his name and I went, I just wrote an article in one of your research studies, and we started talking. But anyway, he did some studies comparing traditional abdominal exercises, like sit-ups, crunches, to a bunch of ball exercises, And what they looked at is they wanted to know what exercises created the most abdominal activation with the least amount of hip flexor and lower back. And what he found, or their research found, was that the Swiss ball rollout, straight arm, and the Swiss ball pike scored the highest based on that criteria. So you may have seen it before. I've written several articles, put videos out there, called it the single best ab exercise, and combined the two, which I actually learned from Jonathan Ross, and I gave him credit for it. But then when it got on articles, they cut all that stuff out. So, but you drive the ball backwards, and then you go up into a pike. Just combine the two together. Now, all these trainers crucifying, you can't say it's the best. Best for what? Whatever. I go, it's just a title. It's just to get your attention. That's what titles do. Well, you wrote a sexy title so it would get people to read it. Exactly. Oh, it got me the #1. It wasn't because of the video. It was because it was on yahoo.com. But it ended up, Yahoo front paged it. They interviewed me for an article, and it got like 2 million views in like 18 hours or something like that. And it got me up to the #1 viewed non-advertisement based fitness video of 2011 or something like that. Yeah. The other one was like, that German chick or whatever that everybody knows, you know what I mean? And I'm like, wow, I'm fully clothed, don't have fake boobs, and I'm #2. You know what I mean? It's pretty cool. And I'm talking about science, So anyway, so you've seen that video. And then also, if we go back to the research we talked about the exercise that involved the shoulders and hips as well. The pike involves the hips, and the roll back, roll out involves the shoulders. So don't forget about that research too. So all this stuff starts to tie together. That's the other thing again. Oh, well, one study this, one study this. Notice how all these studies have similarities and convergence on things. So that's when you start to look and go, okay, I think we're looking in a good direction, because multiple parties looking at different things have similarities. That's when we can start and look and go, I think we're headed in the right direction, where we're not going to have this total paradigm shift, which actually is a scientific thing. Rarely does that happen in science. We're in like this huge body of knowledge and everybody goes, this is the established, and then things start to accumulate. That does happen mostly in medicine. Still very rare though. Still very rare. All right, so we'll get to the specifics now. So top 10 targeted movements, not counting the flexion stuff, the reverse crunch in the ball. So medicine ball roll, I got a video for that, but I'll show you guys. Obviously you want a knee pad. It's actually nice to do with a Dynamax, a weighted ball like this, but you want a more advanced rollout version. Obviously you want to make sure people aren't sagging at their back, they can maintain it. Take a weighted ball. Start out here with the hips forward. Now I've already got some work. Everybody wants to get back here. Nothing. Start them here. Everything's even. I actually tell people, I coach to do a posterior tilt here. Why? Because everybody, to lose it, they're going to anterior tilt. So if they maintain that, then as soon as they feel they're going to lose it, that's when we stop. It just gives them some feedback. And then push it out like this, as far as you can. And then pull it back. Because now, every time I go, talk about serratus, there's a little rotation there, and I'm locking it in with the lat, and then I got to pull it back. Yeah, Billy's like, yeah. And if you wanted to with the rollouts too, if you have one of those old ab dollies or something like that, tie a band to the dolly over there. So now the dolly's being pulled out from under you. So now you have to decelerate it, and then when you bring it back, you're getting resistance pulling that sucker back. I like that one though. Are you guys familiar with the pike roll back, or you want me to demo? Let me demo. You already know what a pike is, so I don't need to show you that one. So, I'm here, like so. I'm going to go back. That's not that difficult, but now you hear me working it as I come up, then hit the pike. Now, a couple things. I don't coach. I used to, but I don't anymore, to bring the butt all the way above the shoulders. Why? Because the abdominals aren't working as much there. That becomes a shoulder exercise. So I just like to stop about there, because now my abdominals have to work more. Come back, and then Slide backwards. Huh? Yeah. Now, the first question I like to get is, oh, what about doing that on a suspension trainer? You know, like the suspension trainer. Fine. Do it on a suspension trainer. The reason why I am not a huge fan, if all you got is a suspension trainer, you don't have a ball. My first question is, I go, why'd you spend $150 when you could just spend $25? But, you know, we got to talk about a benefit to cost, you know, comparison here. Mine is just quickly time and ease of adjustment. Think about how much time it takes to get this in the loops and adjust the loops and get out in the right spot. Secondly, the lever arm is all the way down to your ankles. It's the longest it possibly can be. It's the hardest right off the bat. So you don't have adjustment room for people who can't do it. This one, if I want to shorten the lever arm, I start here. Longer lever arm, there. What if I only got 6 and I want to overload? Here's how I do my mechanical drop set. Shorten the lever arm, continue. I could even go to knee tucks from that point. There you go. Now while I'm here, knee tucks, you obviously know that's a lesser advanced version of a pike. Someone has got a back issue, flexion intolerance, where they say flexion hurts, or they got a disc issue. Keep their back neutral. See, my back's not moving now. So now I'm training stiffness here, mobility there. And by the way, we always think about mobility as just like, you know, in ranges, but you have to control mobility. So there's control right there. That's a mobility exercise. Sometimes when we try to put direct labels on things, it's what makes it confuses us. You know, I always tell people, they go, do you stretch your hip flexors? I go, yep, every time I do a lunge. Do you stretch your hamstrings? Absolutely, every time I do a deadlift. And they look like, because they're expecting me to go like, oh yeah, I do this. Or whatever your choice stretch is, or your hip flexor stretch, or whatever. Why? I go, why? I'm doing RDLs. This is a hamstring stretch, absolutely. And I'm doing 5 sets of 6 or 8 sets of 3. I'm doing it 24 times under a lot of weight. Why do I need to do that? And if you read the research, there's plenty of research that shows strength training increases range of motion more than stretching. Because you're controlling it. By the way, you've got the active component in there, not just the passive component. Stir the pot, you guys know that one. On the ball, right? You can draw your name, you can go through the alphabet, do stuff like that. Barbell rainbow, you got the angle barbell rainbow, you got that one. I'll get to leg lowering in a second. I'll get to posterior reaches in a second. Got a great video with Deanna on the ab snails. Again, if you're not into deflection stuff, you won't like this one, but here's a cool body weight one. You got to have good wrists. Go here, not all the way back, stretch, just like here, like you're propping up at the beach. You lift, and then pull. Down, back, lift. You can really give me a little yoga if you want. Pull as far as you can, down slow. Oh yeah. Shoulders, hips, big time. That's ab snails. I'll show you the medicine ball stuff, and then I'll show you the posterior reaches. Actually, JC Santana's got a great video on posterior reaches, but I'll demo. And I want to take some real time. I may have to modify my location, maybe go here, maybe go there to show you those that Lego one, because I want all you guys to try this one, which will be a real good time. I'll show you this one. We'll get to that one, then we'll take a little break. Then we get to the science stuff. All right, how much is this bad boy? Weigh 14 pounds. All right. Side leans, just here, just like the I'm a little teapot dance. Deceivingly tough. What'd you just say? I'm never doing that one? You just don't, yeah. Hey, it's the primal core lift. Yeah. The primal bend. So, okay, it's the caveman side bend. So, all right, so hold the ball above the head, soft elbows. Say drive the hips one way, ball goes the other way. Just that's it, right there. Just like that. Just a little bit. It's not all hip, not all shoulder, just a little bit of each. And then if you want to go pick it up a little quicker, a lot of stiffness. Big time. This one is deceivingly tough, but you want to talk about integrating all this together, just doing around the world like this. My goal when I do this is yeah, I know it looks like the Matrix. I'm trying to reach the ball out. Why? Long lever arm, this has got to lock in. And as I move the ball, that changes the activation that's happening. Notice, you guys already know this stuff, but the same thing applies. When I come down, I'm doing it from my hips. Strong athletic posture. A lot of your clients are going to do that. You don't want that. So, but I go out as far as I can, slightly behind me, just a little bit, and then around. I'm going to have you guys try this one too. Your clients, like you do 6 one way, 6 the other way, they will go, oh my God, like I like that as a warm-up too, or as a conditioning part, like maybe in a circuit. You can't go real heavy on that one. Deceivingly tough. Deceivingly tough. And I just call that like a body temperature elevator. Like you just, for whatever reason, you just go, my God, I feel like my body temperature just went up 6 degrees doing that. All right. So I'll let you guys try that one. Let me show you leg lowering. All right, so I want to show you this leg lowering. You guys may be familiar with dead bugs or whatnot. And I got this modification, not this exercise, but this little thing with the arms from Dr. Craig Liebenson, his chiropractor. He's out of L.A. Very smart guy, very nice guy. And I think he got this from some other folks from Prague, other physical therapists and whatnot. But anyway, so the rollout, right? I'm sure you have some people, when they do that rollout, they just can't because they got no feedback. They just go into extension. You keep coaching them up, and man, what's going on here? It's basically anti-extension training. You're trying to give them an extension force, and they're trying to resist that extension through the anterior abdominals. We all agree in that. Some people just don't get that. That's cool. So here's an alternative. It works really well for some people who don't get that. You take them here. You have them, this is the part I got from Dr. Liebenson. Take them, you have them push. So I'm actively pushing, not to push myself down, but force there. I'm going to go slightly to the side so you guys can see me better. So I apply force, I'd be straight on, normal. And what I want to do is have them pick up their legs. And can you guys see my hand is right on my ribs? Here's my ribs. When you push, I'm just going to push with this hand for right now. You want them to drop, you tell them to drop their rib angle. See what I just did there? Ribs went boom, like that. So I push, drop the rib angle. When I drop the rib angle, it locks my spine in a position. No, I'm not telling them to posterior rotate. No, I'm not telling them to draw in. Just say rib angle. So now let me get to the position I need to be in to do this. So push, legs are up, drop the rib angle. So the rib angle drops. Then I want them to maintain that as they lower their legs without changing that position and come back. Now, you already know the weight of the legs is pulling me this way, coming out of it. So the further I bring my legs out, the heavier they get because of the lever arm. So it's completely adjustable. Weak, very weak people, go single leg. Some people here, some people there, some people can go all the way. I promise you, don't let your ego get the best of you on this one. Now, it's a high level, high intensity movement. So, you're not going to be sitting there doing the yoga breathing. It's Valsalva maneuver. You have to. That's all right. About every 2 reps, they're just going to have to stop, take a breath, reset it, and then go. All right, so I'll review one more time, then I want you guys to try it. Put them here, push, drop the rib angle. So you'll see the ribs go from like here to boom, down like that. Drop the rib angle. That's where you monitor or watch. Right away you'll feel, oh my God, I feel big contraction. And then you don't let them lose that rib angle as they go. And you only let them go as low as they can and not lose it. And you see me shaking, that's normal. That's anti-extension training as well because I'm resisting that. This one works really well for me just because, and we're going to get into this posture stuff, because I'm slightly naturally more lordotic. It doesn't mean I have more back pain or anything like that. I certainly don't. So because of that, I'm more inclined to extend when I go into extension. So this works better for me because I get feedback. Some people get that more flatter pelvis. They're more inclined to flexion. Exercises like the ball extension rollout is nice because it's okay to give them a little extension. Not because you're changing their posture and you're realigning them. You're just giving them what they're not already getting all day long. That's part of what we know from balance. If you're sitting like this all day long, then you want to do some stuff that reverse that. Just about there, above the hips. So I say push into that, and then I put my hands like right on the rib here, and I say now drop your rib angle. Yes, good. Drop it hard. Good. Now I want him to hold it. Hold that rib angle. I can coach it just like this. And now gradually lower it till your heels touch the floor, but don't lose it. Don't lose it. He's doing good. It's harder than you might think. Good. Now some people go, oh, that's easy. I go, okay, go a little further out. But after about every 2 reps, you need to say, okay, so after every 2 reps, I'll say, okay, stay here, let it out, take a breath. And I should really see something happen here, so now drop it back in. There you go. I really saw it. He went from here to look, boom, that. Keep your head down. It's more difficult than you might think. Good. And this would be more that stiffness control. So this is your isolation type training, but I still think it's important as well. I personally like to use a rope here to keep your hands neutral because your hands are behind you. But anyway, you grab a high cable, you stagger your stance like this, short stagger stance, because if here you eat up all the stretch to your hip flexors. So I like a short stagger stance, posterior rotate the pelvis, and then just lean back as far as you can without feeling any pressure in your low back. Just here and come back. But notice it's a hip extension, not lumbar extension. I already feel that. Ooh. So it's just here, back, here, back. Yeah, and also, I know JC Santana's got a good video on that, but we're looking at tennis, here. Just that said principle, but training anti-extension from the standing position. I prefer a split stance here. So yeah, again, it's the same thing I said. Stretching, stretching every time you do a deadlift. Well, there you go. Stretching your hip flexors right there. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of stepping forward and doing it because when you step forward, it tends to eat up the stretch, and now you have to get the lumbar extension. I like to go here and it's really subtle. And some people just can't do it. Some people will be all lumbar. You have to be able to keep this stable and be able to hip extend. Hip extend. That exercise is not for everybody, but then again, we're also talking about using it for more of an athletic, force generation up here. Anyway, volleyball, spike, something like that. What's that? Yeah. All right. So I mentioned this when we did our little practical breakout there. Excuse me, but I'll go over it again. So this is just in general, purely anecdotal, but something I found useful. Not about correcting posture, but just adjusting the exercise. Because some people do have a little bit of a lordotic curve or what. We're going to explore that in the research. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But that makes you more inclined to be extension dominant. So this is pure anecdotal stuff. For people with increased lordotic individuals, like someone like me, I'll go with Swiss ball pike, leg lowering, Palloff, should be Palloff, not Pallor, sorry. And if I'm using flexion exercises, we'll go with the reverse crunch. So I put that there kind of in yellow because some people are anti-flexion stuff. If you have a tendency to be decreased lordotic, just kind of tend to be that flat back posture, I'll use rollouts, body saw, which is the roll back. You guys have seen that on the suspension trainers. Posterior reaches, and then if we're doing flexion stuff, I like the Swiss ball setup because that gives you extension. So it's just giving you what you don't naturally have already. Stretching, if you're like this, you tend not to stretch here. If you're already like this, you tend not to shorten here. So just giving you what you're not already got. That's all. All right, had to get my Mr. T picture in there. So I just want to do a brief thing, and then we're going to get into some science debunking, if you will. So if you really want a truly strong core, as I said in the beginning, it's not just your abdominals and it's not one magic area. Your lats are part of your core. Lats are actually the only muscle that can connect your pelvis to your shoulders. Biggest muscle in your upper torso. Glutes would be in the lower part. There's some people think with that Serape effect, that the glute is linked to the shoulder via the lat and the thoracolumbar fascia. Some of that is theory. I don't know how much of that I can really say confidently is based on legitimate science. It makes sense. It sounds reasonable. So when you're doing do your lat work. Chin-ups, lat pull-downs, rows. That is, to me, if you ask me, that is core work. Because we know the core is the entire torso. So not a lot of people think about it like this. Upper and mid-back. your middle trapezius, rhomboids. That's that serape effect. You know, there it is going through your shoulders, across to your hips. So mid, like horizontal work, seated rows, bent over rows, Y's, T's, L's. You know, sure, I mean, if something is everything, it's technically nothing. You know, so I'm not just saying, oh, everything you do is core training. Well, I'm just trying to give you this perspective just to say that all of these types of trainings or training methodologies rather, are contributing factors to your whole body working together, and not think about your core as this magic little area that's hot here, or your pelvic floor or something like that. All these things work together. And just applying the same wisdom that we say to the way we train. So what's interesting here is fascially, if you want to talk about fascia, your pecs and your serratus and your obliques here are all fascially fused together. That's all from Porterfield and DeRosa's work. So they're linked through fascial connections to your obliques. So that's why when you punch, it's shoulder, rib, scapula, all this is linked together. So that's where your pushing exercises come from, and I like this from Carl DeRosa. If you're not familiar with who Dr. DeRosa is, first of all, he's a heck of a nice guy. He and his co-author, Jim Porterfield and Carl DeRosa, they've written Mechanical Low Back Pain. These are books. Mechanical Shoulder Pain, Mechanical Neck Pain. Very respected in the physical therapy world. Talked a lot about fascial linkages before it was the hot thing right now. I mean, it's been around. Actually, I found some research paper talking about fascial. Back in the day, you used to call it fascial planes, but they're talking about lines or linkages from the 30s and 40s. It's really not new. It's just becoming trendy. So, yeah, remember, trainers are ahead of research. I got anatomists talking about that stuff in the 30s and 40s. So, a nice link there. Strengthen your low back and glutes. That's Tebow doing a one-leg hip thrust off a bench. I like that one. There's Deanna doing a single leg, single arm extension. I like this one because here the glutes are working hardest at the top. Here it's more the mid-range because of the 45-degree angle. And here they're working the hardest at the bottom. This would be primarily low back and hamstrings and glutes. This is more glute. That's all glute. Little low back. So it's kind of like a lot of low back, a lot of glute. Little low back, a lot of glute. No low back, all glute. You know, that whole posterior chain. A little shout out to Brett Contreras for really bringing it home with the glute stuff. So again, that's all core training, that core limited type work. Glutes are also, if you took off your legs, you would still have your glutes there. So these are, you want a strong core. It's not just doing this abdominal type work. That's really what I'm getting at. And also your neck. Now, I will say right off the bat, I just put this here, I'm not doing this with average mom and dad. I'm not having average mom and dad wanting to lose 10, 20 pounds, look better at the beach, doing neck strengthening exercises. What I wanted to bring this up, though, is remember that if we're looking at all the muscles that surround your spine, this is a core cylinder as well. It's something you don't want to forget. So if we believe it's so important to support the lumbar and the thoracic, why is this not important? It absolutely is important. Now, a quick little tidbit. There's a lot of talk these days with the NFL with concussions, and they're really changing helmets and changing some rules and whatnot. And some people have mentioned that neck strengthening could help minimize concussions and whatnot. The research does not show that. The research does not show neck strength is a direct connection to the prevention of concussions. However, physics do say, and this is based on crash test dummies, I've read some of this stuff, that a wider cylinder, so like if you hypertrophy your neck and make it wider, what happens? A wider cylinder doesn't have as much flexion, and so you can't get as much of a whiplash type effect. So when they have crash test dummies, when they test cars out, sometimes they'll do it with an adult, then it'll be an adult man, adult female. They base it off like a very generalized, and they'll have like a kid in the back. So they all are made from the same material, just the kid is smaller. And they found that the adult with a bigger neck, the forces are the same, they're in the same accident, the whiplash effect is much greater on the smaller dummy because less circumference. So you may, if you really are trying to do something for concussion prevention, we can say it's more likely. We can only deal in likely and unlikely because there's no definitive stuff on this right now, as at the time we're doing this workshop, that it's more likely that just really trying to hypertrophy one's neck, bigger traps, bigger circumference of the neck, that may have some benefit. I put a study here that's actually been showing some pain reduction with specific, keyword specific, strength training exercises. This for the neck, of neck muscles. Basically, I'm getting ahead of myself. Specific strength training exercises led to significant prolonged relief of neck muscle pain, while general fitness training, non-specific to the neck, resulted in only a small amount of pain reduction. I've heard a lot of trainers and coaches say, oh, we get our neck training from doing our Olympic lifts and our kettlebell work and our whatever else. No. This shows you need some specific work. And if you're trying to hypertrophy something, I don't know how many squats are hypertrophying necks. Right, so we know there. So possible injury prevention. Combat sports, there's actually a performance base. Anybody who wrestles knows that when you're getting a takedown, you want to use your head to push into the body. Anybody who's in combat sports knows that kind of stuff. Your neck is also important to be able to deal, control and move. So even getting I've heard some coaches say, even getting your head around quicker. Increasing the force production to get your head around and see something happen before you get hit blindsided. So, again, I would say for athletes on that one, definitely some upper trapezius there and all those muscles around your neck. Just some quick ideas. This is like a side plank, all for your neck, front plank. This this is not a picture of anybody I know. This is from the website. But it's basically like a ankle cuff for your head, weighs 10 pounds. And this is a really old picture, but just put it on your head and you hold your head stable while you're doing your planks or push-ups or whatever. And now you got an extra weight on your head. We used to joke and call that the Taliban circuit. And then I got this exercise actually from Martin Rooney. Put the band around your neck, under your feet. Hold this, and then as you extend up. Actually, it's a really nice, I've done it standing too. It's a really nice warm-up for deadlifts because obviously the lever arm's long, so all your paraspinals are really turned on. And then I just kind of showed, there's where the wrestler's being pulled, so there's the carryover. This is, wow, this is old. This is like the first gym we had. We had 2 gyms past this, but this is Kate, who's been in a lot of my videos, but here's the end of the bench. She's doing a dumbbell press. Her head is off the bench completely, and she's just holding neutral. So she's getting core training for her neck while she's getting her dumbbell work. So that's the way I might incorporate it for somebody who's not really interested in it, but just as a way just to maintain some strength. All right, I had to get the old "you can't handle the truth" in there. So let's hit. So here's what I want to hit. Now we're going to go total into the nerd, myth busting, what claims versus evidence type of stuff. First thing I'm going to do is talk about TVA stuff. Now I know it was much bigger. Like 5-10 years ago, that was the big thing. Some of us now have kind of gone past it, but there's still a lot of misunderstanding about it. So I think it's worth noting. Then we're going to go into some psoas stuff, which is very much worth noting because there's so many different mistakes with that. Then we're going to finish with the big one, which is looking at core as it relates to spinal alignment, pelvic tilt, and back pain, because we hear these things. Does anterior lower cross syndrome, oh, that's weak abdominals, and we're going to open you up for back pain. We're going to see if the research really matches the claims there and should that affect our training or not. So first, we'll go into TVA. Got to thank this guy. He's a great friend of mine, Mark Comerford. He's kind of one of my mentors, I'd say, in the physical therapy world. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because I would say 90% of the slides I'm going to give you for about TVA and psoas are his slides. I got the stuff from him. He was nice enough to give me his stuff, and does lots of research studies. He has his own performance matrix and assessment protocols and things. He's actually from Australia, but speaks all around the world. He's got a really good book that just came out called Kinetic Control. I think it's called the exercises for uncontrolled movement or something like that. Very well respected in the physical therapy world, and just a heck of a nice guy. So those are both his websites. A lot of good research on these sites, by the way. Just go to these websites. I think the same research is on both sites. And just go to the reference section and look at some of the research studies. Amazing stuff. All right, so transverse abdominis. There's my anatomy review. There's your TVA. That's top-down view, lateral view. All right. Okay, now, right off the bat, I will tell you that this whole concept of this classification system of this inner core and outer core, or inner unit and outer unit you may have heard, is highly debated among experts, and in some research says there might be some efficacy. So even just using this classification, some people who know research could really ding me on this right now and just say that's a total human construct that we've made to, you know, kind of dumb it down for ourselves, and that's not how the body works, and they would not be wrong to say that. So we're at that point. Basically what I'm getting at is nobody really knows what's going on right now, and that's the problem. Everybody we hear a lot of claims, but so much of this is debated that for anybody to stand up and say, speak in black and white and make any direct correlations of cause and effect between muscle function and posture and pain and performance is wrong, because things are so up in the air. Some people do agree on this. So the general thought process here is that you have these local muscles and these global muscles. Oh yeah, he's got this. I'm going to pop all these up real quick. So in regards to this local inner core function, and I don't think people don't question as much what these muscles do, but as if we can really look at them as separate entities. That's really what I mean. All right, so in general, if we roll with this, these are the local muscles, the transverse abdominis, the multifidus. Muscle stiffness to control segmental translation. So when we talk about stability, see, we think stability is an isometric hold. That's not. That's isometric hold. That's strength, isometric strength. When these people talk about stability, they're saying when you move, does one vertebrae not move further than it's supposed to be over the other? So we always think stability means not move. No, stability means controlling unwanted motion. So when I go overhead for a snatch or go over here, I want this motion, but I don't want extra motion. I don't want if I don't have ligaments, then this goes out of socket. I'm still working on stability while I'm moving. That's how the body works. So that's the first disconnect right there. We say, oh, this is stability training. No, that's just isometric strength training. Big difference. It's interesting. With these inner muscles, no or very minimal length change in the functional movements, which means they don't necessarily get short or long based on your posture. So if you're like this, you're like this, they don't really have a lot of length change, like this, like this. They don't have that. So they can't be long and weak and short and tight. Doesn't happen to these muscles. And they work on this anticipatory recruitment in all directions prior to functional loading. So basically just thinking about picking up the bottle, some of these muscles will turn on. And activity, this is real important, is continuous and independent of the direction of movement. That again goes along with this one, meaning I can go here and it doesn't mean that my spinal muscles are now somehow inhibited because they're being put on stretch and disadvantaged. No, because that would put me at risk. So the body has been brilliantly put together, whether it's been evolution or something up there, who knows, we're not going to talk about that, but it's pretty well put together for that reason. All right, so this is just a little setup, the core cylinder. So you have diaphragm, transverse abdominis. This actually it should not be pelvic floor. Diaphragm should be up here, pelvic floor down there, so that's actually backwards. Interesting, posterior psoas. Here's your multifidus. This would be the front of the body, back of the body. That is your posterior psoas. Your psoas mirrors your multifidus. That should give you a little cue where we're going to go with the psoas stuff, because everybody talks about the psoas as like the enemy of the spine. Right? We have top and bottom, we have around, and we have side to side here. It all works to keep everything nice and tight and in. So this is not argued. This is what these muscles do. That's how they're set up based on anatomy. That's just a very crude version of it. Okay, so this is this local core. Like I said, the disagreement, or where people could ding me is, or ding you if you take this stuff, is can we really draw this definitive, we have this internet, or they are really linked together? That's the gray area. All right, so there's the transverse abdominis, pop in there, segmental multifidus, psoas front. So they both connect to the vertebra. Pelvic floor at the bottom, diaphragm at the top, and then we put in the global muscles. That's all your obliques, multifidus, even your trapezius. This is your scapula, by the way, your trapezius and serratus. And then your mobilizers. So that's your gluteals, iliacus, abductors, rotator cuff muscles, delts. All right, so now let's get to this. All right, so whether you guys are doing this or not, good, this may help you debunk some other people's stuff, but there's a talk, I still hear it, draw in before you do stuff. I still see that. So if movements are planned, slow, and the central nervous system can predict potential displacement, there is no need to consciously precontract transverse abdominis. Comerford's done a lot of research on this. Even in the presence of back pain, when the TVA is delayed, now this is all Hodges research and all this stuff where this stuff came from. Even in back pain when the TVA is delayed. So the first thing to notice is the TVA was only delayed 50 to 90 milliseconds in people with back pain, not in healthy subjects. So the first thing is if someone doesn't have back pain, they're already out of this. And the people who did have back pain, it was only 50 to 90 milliseconds before the stabilizer came on. Nobody takes on load that fast unless you throw a ball to them over their head and they go, what? Oh! And catch it. As soon as I go, I'm going to pick up that barbell, 50 to 90 milliseconds is gone. That's like 10 seconds, 5 seconds, gone. I've already bridged the gap. From starting to move the arm, leg, or spine, there is almost no situation in the gym when load will be taken on that fast. All right, so that was the first thing that was misinterpreted. And that's based on Hodges research. So, what I'm doing here, this stuff that I'm giving you, is like hundreds of slides. This is like all-day workshops from Comerford. And I'm just cutting it down to the bare bones of the bare bones of the bare bones, right to the point. If you want to get to that stuff, go to his website. He's got his lectures that you could purchase, and he'll give you the 5-hour filibuster. If you go, I'm not convinced, go there. I'm giving you the bullet point. Oh, so people will say TVA is off. The TVA has never tested off. It only tested late. Also, if you understand muscle function, no muscle is ever off unless you are paralyzed or dead. Muscles can be down-regulated from where they need to be firing at, but you cannot walk and have your glutes off. You cannot breathe and have your abdominals off. Period. Unless someone de-innervates that nerve, paralysis or death, that's it. Not if you're overweight, not if you've got scoliosis, none of that stuff. And as soon as you take on load, those muscles are facilitated. That is physiology. It's can't argue with that. All right, so here's this recruitment threshold differences. Back to this local versus global, inner versus outer core stuff. So the local muscles, that's the TVA, multifidus, inner psoas, pelvic floor, diaphragm. It's the S factor. Slow motor unit dominant, slow and static hold, sustained contraction. Basically working the low load, non-fatiguing, like we're talking about right now, or in breathing, or like you're all doing right now. Normal. Global muscles, those are your high threshold muscles, fast motor unit dominant, fast type actions, and they fatigue pretty quickly. So for instance, your diaphragm does not get tired from breathing all day long, but your biceps get tired pretty quick after doing 8 or 10 curls with a 30-pound dumbbell or whatever weight's appropriate. That's the bicep, that's the diaphragm. So what we're talking about, it does make legitimate sense. All right, now, this is some research. And I like to, again, because I like to say how ahead we are on research here. 1981. I purposely used older references so we can see how behind we're. This is actually from McGill, Dr. Stu McGill. Check this out. 1 to 3% increase in muscle tension in the deep local muscles can significantly increase stiffness about a motion segment. That means each segment of your spine. I'm talking about stability there. 1 to 3%. That's hardly any sort of strength. So even if you lost, if we're looking at 100% of your strength, even if you lost 50% of your strength in those muscles, you would still have 47% more than you in the reserve. I'm hinting to the connection between core strength and as it has to do with stability. I may be a little off on this stuff. As little, this goes back to this. This one's just looking at MVC. This was looking at percentage on a 100 scale. As little as 25% of maximum voluntary contraction, MVC, of the muscles around a joint, that's any joint, is needed to provide optimal stiffness and stability around that joint. And you would think that would make sense, because if it took so much muscle activity, energy, to control your joints, we'd all get tired walking. You get exhausted walking.
What is the importance of that kind of amount of load?
That's what we're saying. The muscles that are your main stabilizers, they are on no matter what in small load, and they don't fatigue. When you take on big loads, other muscles, your global muscles, they're what take over, and they're more fast motor unit dominant. So yes, it is determinant to load. But what we're saying is sometimes if someone has lost stability, it's not necessarily a strength issue because it doesn't take strength to stabilize a joint. Make sense? Oh, where's that stuff that you printed? Right here? Oh, okay, cool. Perfect. Oh man, she's got it all in a nice bind. Look at this. Nice binders and everything. Wow. All right. Okay, so this is actually taken from, oh, you know what, I didn't give you the one paper. Okay, so I left this for you guys, but you can forward the email to everybody. There's a couple papers that I want you all to check out. One of them is by Dr. Eyal Letterman. He did two groundbreaking, and very controversial papers, but I always joke controversial. I'll say it, most people don't agree on anything, and anything can be controversial if people don't agree on it. So the first paper he wrote, I think, was maybe when did he write The Myth of Core Stability? I want to say it was late 2000s, 2008, maybe 2009. Huge research-based paper. I mean, he cited many, many studies. This is from that study, and the reason why I left his references in there, reference to different studies, is so you can go back to the paper, and if you want to see the actual studies that he got these quotes from, I left them in there. I pulled this right out of his paper. I have another paper from him, which we'll get to in a second here. So this is from his paper. So this is core muscle activation during normal activities, all from research. He's just bringing it all together. During standing and walking, the trunk muscles are minimally activated, and standing in the deep erector spinal, psoas, and quadratus lumborum are virtually silent. In some subjects, there is no detectable EMG activity in those muscles. That's during standing and walking. During walking, the rectus abdominis has average activity of 2% of MVC, and external obliques 5%. All that's from this research study here that he referenced. During standing, active stabilization is achieved by very low levels of co-contraction of trunk flexors and extensors, estimated at less than 1% of NVC, rising up to 3% maximum voluntary contraction when a 32-pound kilogram, that's times 2.2 pounds, so we're talking over 60 pounds, weight is added to the torso. That's just standing, like holding something heavy, like a suitcase or something like that. With a back injury, you'd think, oh God, there's a lot of loss there. It's estimated to raise these values by 2.5%. Not that big. Maximum voluntary contraction for the unloaded and loaded models. During bending and lifting, so now we're adding movement to it, lengthening lever arms and whatnot, a weight of about 15 kilograms, a little over 30 pounds, co-contraction increases by only 1.5% of MVC. These are not his studies. These are him compiling the research and showing all these studies have very, very similar findings. What is the big takeaway from this? None of this has to do with strength, because we have a huge strength reserve. Your body is brilliantly designed. It has a tremendous amount in the reserve. That's why you can tear an ankle. I'm walking around with a torn ACL. No problem. Why? Because I have reserve, other things that can take over for that ACL. Other ligaments, muscles. Your body is brilliantly designed that way. Imagine how screwed we would be if one injury and all of a sudden we just went, I can't go hunt, can't go eat, can't do anything. No. You have lots of reserve. Oh, wow, I didn't even realize that's like popping up like that. I don't even know how to program that. So the takeaway from this. It's not possible to maintain a transverse abdominis recruitment pattern and move, because as soon as you go into global movements, it's a local muscle. Your global muscles take over. And Comerford has some demonstrations where you can feel a TVA, and then he'll have you move, and then you can see the obliques pop on, but I don't want to get too far into that. As soon as you move, even if you maintain a hollowing or a draw-in, you've gone global, because those are your global muscles that create that movement. You can't stay TVA dominant. As soon as you move it, you start going oblique dominant and whatnot. So even if you were trying to, you couldn't do it anyway. So all that stuff that we heard about way back in the 90s and early 2000s, draw in before you do everything, TVA, that was misinterpreted from the start. So it wasn't that the research was wrong and then it righted itself. It's that the people who reinterpreted the research didn't know how to interpret it and went ahead and taught it to trainers. And then it became, that trainer told that trainer, and that trainer became normal trainer gospel. It was wrong it was misinterpreted from the jump. So, check this out. Non-functional, specific recruitment, motor control training, that is like draw-in, multifidus swelling, all the boring physical therapy stuff, has significant research behind it. Hodges and Richardson, they've done most of it. There's Hydes, Peter O'Sullivan, Joel, Hodges again. Lots of references behind that. So this pretty much is a summary of all their research. So Hodges has been the main person, but some other people have replicated it, and some people have a hard time replicating some of this timing stuff. But anyway, the above, all these researchers have demonstrated this. That specific non-functional, that means lying down, pulling this, cognitive stuff, motor control training, like TVA draw-in. By the way, if you go like this and you can't breathe, you're not doing it right. You should be able to breathe the whole time. So if you go, I'm drawing it in. No, that's an oblique. I mean, you can hold it and can breathe normal, so that's the first mistake. But again, this is physical therapy stuff. Only that type of training, the draw-in done correctly, can correct the timing delay in the transverse abdominis that's consistently associated. Key word is associated. Here's the problem, and I'll get to this. No one has showed that this delay is the cause of back pain. They've showed that it's a byproduct of the pain. So if you're thinking, oh, we're back to TVA, it's the magic thing. No. I just got to unplug miss first. The functional strength movements do not improve the timing delay in the short term, that is. Long term, they very well may. Studies haven't been done. So, why did I bring this up if the TVA is not the magic thing? Well, first off, to let you know it was misinterpreted from the get-go. So when it was debunked later, the people who originally did it were like, I never said that. You know what I mean? I never said that. These people said that. So we were debunking a myth, a straw man, if you will. But this is all about stability, the muscles that control segmental stability. What this research does show is if you don't have good stability because of a timing problem, if that is the case, you're not changing the timing by doing high-load stuff anyway. So where's the carryover? So when we say I'm working on stability and do a pow-off press or working on stability while I do my rainbow on the landmine. No, you're working on isometric strength, but you are not changing timing. That's what applies to the climate of the industry right now. So we've taken a faulty thought process, debunked it, and then used another application instead, which is also based on a faulty thought process. Strengthening exercises do not improve timing delay in none of those muscles. And by the way, in that research, all those global muscles showed to be delayed, not just the TVA. It was the multifidus, the posterior psoas, all of them. Timing delay remains the same when you do more functional type exercises. So, we call that stability. That's a pow-off press. That's me doing getting ready to do a plate crunch. So stability is preventing unwanted motion. Stability does not mean don't move. This still requires stability as I go into flexion. I need to control each segment. I need to have good knee stability while I cut and move. In fact, I would argue that you're working more functional stability when it's integrated in movement, not standing still, because I've never seen an athlete who's good at standing still. That's not what athletics is. It's about moving. So that's the first disconnect that we have. So you're going to teach, every time you move, you are working on stability. You're controlling the unwanted movement. I don't have an ACL. I have less ability to control unwanted movement at my knee. So if I started doing lateral type stuff, yeah, my knee may go because that ligament is not there to control that. But that's through movement. So again, where I'm getting at it here, we hear a lot of talk now about this is a mobility exercise. This is a strength, or this is a stability exercise. You can't pull those apart. You really can't. You can't pull those apart. That's the big confusing thing. So, quick review on this. Again, this is really crunching hours and hours of lots of science and information. but I'm briefly on it because I think we're kind of past the TVA stuff anyway. I do see it pop up. TVA is never off. This is all based on research, not my opinion, not Comerford's opinion. TVA is never weak. It's only been shown to be late, and only late in people with low back pain. No need for non-low back pain people to draw in ever, because they never show they had the problem. And even if you have pain, as soon as you pick up weight or you anticipate lifting something, you still have all your muscles on anyway. It's impossible to move and stay TVA dominant. You cannot strengthen the TVA. It was never shown to be weak. Again, just timing. I put that twice because it stands to be reiterated. If you're into the brace stuff, which is the McGill stuff, you can brace or you can let the body handle it on its own anyway, which is my preference. Not necessarily a draw-in. And Stu McGill's done a good job of showing how if you pull in, you're actually... He has like guy wires, and he says if you bring them in, you have less stability, and he's absolutely right. So when anybody knows when you're doing like things like squats and whatever, you actually want to get big. Yeah. So, all right. So all that drawing stuff misinterpreted from the jump. The issue is, now we get into this. So this is from Letterman, the fall. So this article I have right here is from Dr. Eilim. It's a newer article. It's called The Fall of the Postural Structural Biomechanical Model and Manual and Physical Therapies Exemplified by Lower Back Pain. It's very intense articles. How many research studies does he have here cited? Oh, he doesn't have the numbers. It's well over 100. And good studies. Probably the best article looking at the summary of mechanic movement and posture and how the research lines up with the claims out there to date. So this is from his article right here. No study to date has shown that back pain is due. This is the important part. Just because something is related to it or a symptom doesn't mean it's the cause. And that's another thing we misinterpreted. No study to date has shown that back pain is due to timing differences in specific muscles, such as the transverse abdominis. These control changes, motor control changes, have been observed only in individuals who already have back pain. They probably represent the outcome rather than the cause of back pain. And some studies have validated that it is just an outcome. What they do is they'll inject like a saline solution, and they'll look at, that causes pain for 5 minutes. I'm not sure how long, but it causes temporary pain. And when they measure EMG, and they found that it creates the delay. And when the pain goes away, the delay is no longer there. So they know it's just a symptom. And that's the thing. We can't get caught up. This is the thing with science. We can't get caught up in observational studies and think that that means cause and effect. One of the ones I see floating around right now is there's some observational studies. Breathing is the hot thing now. We're past the TVA. We're past the bracing. Now the new magic is, no, you got to get that breathing right. You got to get that breathe. You got to breathe like a, lay down. It's just the belly, and let's do all that stuff. No research foundation for that whatsoever, right? It's the new magic bullet. We always have one every 5 years, I promise. You know what I mean? Somebody watching this 5 years later, they're going to go, breathing. That's so 2013. Now we're doing whatever it is.
Is that for activation?
Well, yeah, changing this timing. It's the magic core stability thing. So the first issue is it's falling under the assumption that there's something magic special about the core. First problem. Second problem is that there's this, magic bullet that all you got to do is this one thing and that changes everything. And that always changes every 5 to 10 years, right? So it's no different than what we hammer our clients on. Our clients come in sometimes, oh, I just got the new so-and-so special magic workout device. It says 8 minutes a day. We go, oh, no. It comes with hard work and dedication and good diet. You can't. It's not just that simple. It's more complicated than that. And they go, oh. And then we go to the conference and somebody goes, all you got to do is, huh. And we go, yes. I'm here to tell you, no, it's more complicated than that. We fall for the same stuff. It's just marketed to us with bigger terms and talking about ligaments and tendons and neuro this and jargon instead of saying terms that our clients like ripped and lean. They're just speaking different languages. But we still have big claims, no evidence. That's the same. That's the same. So So with this breathing stuff or rolling stuff, it's talking about, oh, it's retraining timing and whatnot. Well, first off, we already know that the research says if you don't have pain, you don't have a timing problem anyway. Right? Oh, before I get up, so the breathing stuff. So I've seen some studies floating around. There's one observational study by some folks done in Prague that are really big on the breathing stuff. Some therapists, their whole thing is about that. And it showed a link between people who have back pain tend to have a shallower breathing. They don't breathe as much from their belly. It's a shallower breathing. That doesn't mean your interventions work. It just means that when you have pain, maybe that's a protective mechanism. And people are going, oh, well, this validates my whole breathing thing. Sorry, Skippy, it does not. What validates your intervention is when we have a controlled trial, when we take 100 people and 50 people with back pain do your strategy and the other 50 don't, and we see who gets better after 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever. And every time those things are done, all these fancy things fail. So it's likely, it's a safer bet, the smart money is to, anytime we hear the new thing, is to think that it's probably going to fail like all the others, because every one of them has. It's a safer bet not to jump on the new bandwagon in regards to that stuff. And also not to fall for observational studies. You want controlled trials. Big difference. All right. This is from Comerford. Measurement studies have demonstrated that cognitive, non-functional, low-threshold motor control retraining can more effectively recover the timing delay in the short term. So they have found, I don't have the references for that, but I know Mark does. I've had it in his manuals. I've seen it in his manuals. It can recover it in the short term. Specific motor control retraining can reduce the symptoms of reoccurrence, which is the timing delay. Great, but if it doesn't make the back pain any better, and by the way, this stuff has not shown in the studies to actually take the pain away or anything. So where am I getting at? Some of the best people in the world when it comes to science and therapists still have no clue what's going on when it comes to back pain and training, retraining these things. And yet we got people going, I got the answer. I got it. All you got to do is roll this way or breathe this way. What I'm going to tell them is I'm going to give them that book, How We Know What Isn't So. I'm going to go read this. Read this first. It's like, I always ask people, I go, really, the best minds, the best science, all the people that have tried to work on this, none of them have got it, and what's the likelihood you got it? So I ask, I go, what's the likelihood? You may, but what's the likelihood that you're right and everybody else has been wrong? That much. Might be there. If it is, it'll come out in trials. It'll come out in trials. It'll be easy. All right. So let's get into the psoas. Oh, so breathing. I mentioned here rolling. So one of the other things here is rolling. You know, roll one side, roll the other side. It's not about strength, it's about timing. That is right. I've heard that claim mentioned with rolling. But if it's about timing, then we know that the cognitive stuff is what changes the timing, not the active moving stuff. So that goes against the research. And we also know that the timing delay is not necessarily a problem. We don't even know if that's the problem to begin with. So that's a big red flag. Third, we only know that the people who had the problem with timing were people with pain. So why are people without pain rolling on the floor? To try to change this timing. So you see, when we start looking at an application, people go, what do you think of this? And I go, it's not what I think, it's what the evidence says. Okay, we don't have evidence on this, but how does this line up with the way we know the world works based on other evidence? And I'm just going to, if it lines up, I'm going to go, great. So this is the filter I run it through. Does this line up with this? No. Does this line up with this? No. Does this go against the said principle? Yes. I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. You're convincing this goes against every piece of evidence that we have so far. So your burden of proof, now you have to offset all this. Until you do that, I'm not on that bandwagon. All right, psoas, friend or foe? Here's my very in-depth anatomy lesson. There's a little chunk of your psoas, there's your psoas, black and white, and you can see it, it's pelvic brim, iliacus. That is your psoas right there. The connections here, after the pelvic brim, iliacus, and psoas, are fascial connections. The actual muscle part of the psoas ends right there at the brim. All the rest is fascial connection. Maria, am I good over here, this angle? Okay, good. So, myths and misconceptions. Again, this is based off of, this is directly from Comerford's stuff here. So a little bit of appeal to authority on this one. What he says is a function based on theory and assumption. He says very little direct measurement of that muscle. Very few papers of high quality. Many have been misinterpreted. And he says many of the anatomy texts talking about it are highly out of date. He said he has a Gray's Anatomy book in his clinic and he uses it to stand on it to get over top the treatment table. Okay, so what's interesting is our thought about this is very, very high out of date. So the psoas fascia is continuous with the diaphragm fascia. Now this is basic physiology based on some work done by Gibbons. This paper actually is referenced on their site. And psoas fascia is continuous with the pelvic floor fascia. Continuous with the diaphragm fascia, continuous with the pelvic floor fascia. Does that make it, if we're following this inner unit concept, they all work together then. All right, so psoas is a part of the inner unit. That stuff was done in '99. So here's your psoas, posterior psoas there. You can see how it all works together. All right, so people say that the psoas can get short and tight and cause low back pain. You know, say your psoas is too strong or overactive. The reality is, as we talked about before, your psoas is a local low-load muscle. Minimal to no length change. It does not get tight because it doesn't change length that much. It can't. And it doesn't require a lot of force. Remember, it's the 1 to 3% of MVC, stabilizers, and quiet breathing and normal walking. So it can't get tight and it can't get overly strong because it's not a strength muscle. So these claims defy the physiology. And they're made by people who don't understand the physiology. And then they're repeated by folks like me for way too long until we actually investigate stuff. So the takeaway, I'm shortening this up big time. From so far, I'm not done with the psoas. The psoas works with your inner unit, not against it. That is, if you're going to follow the inner unit, outer unit concept, which I tell you is debatable. The fact is these muscles do what I'm saying they're doing. I'm saying to talk about them as two separate units. That's the debatable part. The psoas is a part of the inner unit. It mirrors your multifidus on each side of the vertebrae, disc. The psoas is primarily a spinal stabilizer, not a mobilizer. We're going to get to that in a little bit more. Psoas does not get short or tight due to its design and role as a low-load local stability muscle. Okay, this is a great paper. One of the world's top anatomists in the, I don't know when he retired, mid-2000s maybe. He used to write a review paper on low back pain, but Nikolai Bogduk. Type in his name on PubMed, you'll get all kinds of stuff. He's written several books. That's the last name, the Nikolai, or Nicola, I think, Nikolai or Nicola, Bogduk. He did this anatomy review of the psoas, and he was an anatomist. You know, he got into the bodies and looked at it all. Very respected guy. This was done in 1997. This is from his paper, directly from that paper. It's on the internet. Line of pull is too close to the axis, about the psoas, too close to the axis of rotation of the spine to contribute to flexion, extension, or lateral flexion. So here's your spine. If your psoas was out like this, it could pull it. Your psoas is like this. So even if it shortens it, you got one on each side. It can only put compression on the spine and minimal. If it was wide like this, then it can really pull. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't have a mechanical advantage because the lever arm is almost in line with the spine. More suited for eccentric control, so decelerating movements, and control of spinal movements. EMG activity, this is the big one, does not mean muscle provides movement. So a lot of people will go, oh, well, any EMG study will show hip flexion and bang, the psoas goes on. Well, yeah. What happens when your leg is up? Gravity is pulling me down, which is pulling my spine into extension. Wouldn't a spinal stabilizer be turned on to keep my spine still? Absolutely. Who says it's creating movement? That was where the disconnect was coming. Oh, psoas is on, must mean it's doing it. No, it's offsetting this. So that's why nobody questions as a hip flexor. Somebody said it, and the next person printed it, until people looked at it. Again, this stuff is not new. We just keep perpetuating the same old myths. So this is actually your psoas. This is a cadaver part of it. That's the psoas at L5. This is the anterior part of it at L3. So you can see the design of the fibers. So they actually went, so what I like about Comerford's research is what they do is they match a functional model with a biomechanical model with an anatomical model. So they'll cut that sucker out of there, they'll look at it and they go, based on the line of the fibers and its structure, what do we think this does? Okay, now based on its origins and insertions and attachment, what do we think this does? Do these two line up? Now let's look at EMG and let's look at movement. Do all three of these line up? And when they have connections of all three, they go, we think we understand what this muscle does now. They're very thorough like that. And you'd be surprised some of the stuff they come up with. They go, this muscle doesn't do this muscle does it. It's pretty wild. So the fascicle length, 10 to 15 centimeters. Fiber length, the anterior fascicles of your psoas, 3 to 8 centimeters. Posterior fascicle, 3 to 5 centimeters. So the only way it can change, that's about an inch. So the psoas can only lengthen about an inch. Is that enough to do this? No. So anatomically, it just can't lengthen enough to do that. Psoas can shorten, oh sorry, I was pointing at this, I meant this. Between 1 centimeter to 1.5 centimeters to 1 to 2.5 anterior posterior. So round that off, you're looking at about an inch. So this doesn't have the lengthen and shorten capacity. Unable to produce sufficient range of force to be an effective hip flexor. Not a hip flexor. I got more for you. The general, and I'll tell you, I'll be the first one to tell you, my anatomy sucks. And if you're, don't be like, oh my God, he's going to get so into anatomy. I don't remember most of this stuff. You don't remember because you don't use it. All right, so it's nice to have reminders and whatnot. So I'm not standing behind, aside from what I have on slides, you could ask me some muscle and origin insertion, I'd go, So please avoid those questions to me. But in general, a bursa, we all know about bursas from people getting bursitis and things. A bursa generally acts as a buffer zone where muscles act as pulleys. So anytime a muscle is sliding over something like this, there's a bursa there to kind of as a buffer zone, right? That's what bursas do. Now, who has the bursa underneath it? Iliacus or psoas? You know where I'm going with this. This is from Primal Pictures. There's the bursa. And I like Primal because they're pretty much the more accurate ones. I mean, sometimes you see, you type in like a muscle and then do a Google Images search, and you'll see that muscle drawn 5 different ways. Primal stuff is accurate. Some people call this the iliopectineal bursa. There's the bursa. Remember the muscle that goes over acts as a pulley. In this case, a hip flexor. Bam. That is your psoas. That is a tendon and fascial connection. That is your iliacus. This is from Bogduk from 92. Remember, we're head of research. There's his general drawing of the spine and psoas. Look how close that is. So imagine when that muscle shortens, what does that do? Creates compression on the spine. Not a lot of movement. Compression can be stability. Compression can also be a problem if you don't take compression well, but that would mean you're injured. You already have a problem. So, from Bogduk, this is a research-supported biomechanical, the new function, what we understand now. In the lumbar spine, minimal movement function of lumbar spine, primary force of lumbar spine is axial compression, which is a great way to be stable, by the way. If I took 6 books and you said, I'm going to take that middle book, and I said, no. If I stood on it, I'm giving axial compression. You have to pull out more than I got down there to get that book out. That's stability. I'm protecting that. In the SI joint, resultant force of posterior rotation of the abdomen. Actually, what they're showing is in the SI joint, the psoas is actually a posterior rotator, not an anterior rotator. That's Gibbons 2001. And then in the hip, primary force is acetabular compression. So anything that takes the head of your femur and sucks it into the hip socket would be psoas. That's not something we really have to worry about. It's more physical therapy related stuff. All right, I want to address this one too. A lot of people go, oh, well, shear. Psoas creates shear on the spine. So, and that shear is what causes spine problems. Well, pretty consistent finding with the research. 1977, 92, and McGill in 95. All had very, very similar findings when they did this. So what they found is that compression is always greater than shear on the spine. And compression is how you offset shear. As long as I have more force going this way than I have going this way, this doesn't happen. That make sense? So what they found was without intra-abdominal pressure, so without a lot of squatting or sitting up or doing whatever, you had a 3-to-2 ratio of compression to shear. 3-to-2 ratio compression to shear. With intra-abdominal pressure, where you're doing an exercise, or walking or doing something. And by the way, the number one cause of compression is your muscle contraction. Muscle contraction. Not posture, muscle contraction. If I gave you a 10-pound dumbbell and put it in each hand, you'd have some compression on your spine if they measured a disc. You could be in neutral posture. If we raise the dumbbells up like this, 1 pound here equals 10 pounds on your low back, times 10, that's 100. Times 100, compression on your back is going to go up because the muscle contraction goes up. So when we see those charts, compression is this much and compression is this much, it's not because of the posture, it's because each one of those positions demands more muscle contraction. So, compression is always more than shear. Now, I will tell you, you get problems, especially in a disc, when shear and compression, so compression can make shear worse if they're equal. Because if I got my disc, here's my disc in the middle, and I got my 2 vertebrae, and I got compression and shear, that's when you can rip something. All right? But if I always have more compression than shear, no shear occurs. So that's when you get the risk. When you have a lot of muscle contraction and you're physically rotating, now you have compression because of muscle contraction, and you're adding the shear from the movement. That's why you got to be careful with rotary type training, which goes back to your question, would you use this with people with back issues? Herniated disc, no. Because they already have a compression problem. Some people with herniated discs can't even do heavy deadlifts or even in a neutral posture, or even do heavy farmer walks. Why? Because the compression is so great that it just pushes on their disc, they can't take that. But that's something you need to deal with. Let's say you let a physical therapist work it as a posterior, lateral herniation, posterior, anterior, all those things is it pushing against the nerve, irritating the nerve, So takeaway, psoas does not place anterior shear forces on the lumbar spine. Conclusion on the psoas. Psoas is your friend. Along with the multifidus, front back, it's the only muscle in the body that mechanically stabilizes the disc because it attaches to the disc. Anything that causes you to pull your femur into the pelvis, into the hip socket actually, more specifically, is psoas training. And it's a spinal and hip stabilizer. Now, I'm a practical guy, and I would like to go, okay, you said you weren't going to give us much fluff and puff, and you showed us a lot of cool stuff. How does this change my training? That one right there, not much. I just think it's pretty cool to understand that. Now, there is a little reason that it might change your training. So you're going to go, well, am I still not going to stretch my hip flexors? No, when you stretch your hip flexors, you're just stretching your iliacus. You're calling it the wrong muscle. Still good to stretch your hip flexors. I will say this, though. When people have hips that click and clunk, they're showing you they may have some instability there. Stretching their hips is not what you want to do. Because we know, or trying to inhibit psoas. That's the other thing. So a lot of people go to a massage therapist, or a Rolfing or whatever, and they go, oh, so-and-so got in there and do the psoas. And I've seen the self-myof, you take the ball and you dig it in here. Anybody that tells you to try to inhibit your psoas, or your psoas is tight, does not understand what the psoas does. They're behind. We just went over it. So I took it back. It should change the way you train if you're doing that stuff. But in regards to stretching or stuff like that, no, you're still going to open your hips up. You're just calling it the wrong muscle, group of muscles. But you don't want to inhibit a spinal stabilizer. and trying to get in there to do something, you know. People go, oh, it makes me feel better. Well, you're getting a neuromuscular relaxation. Anything that makes you relax, have a drink. You want muscles to relax? Have a few sips of, have a little nightcap. That'll do it. You don't have to go through the pain of getting dug into. Okay. So now, last series here. You guys bored yet? Starting to fade. You're like, oh man, the science stuff. Last round of the science stuff. So, core strength and stability as it relates to posture and low back pain. Claims versus the evidence. So, I'm not going to say anybody is right and anybody is wrong. I will just tell you, here's what the claims are, here's what the evidence supports. Or here's what the evidence is disproven. What you want to take from this, and you still want to do stuff that's, make claims that aren't supported by evidence, that's fine, but I will just label you as a BSer. That's cool, but, you know, we just all have to know why we're doing stuff that we're doing. I like this one. Michael Shermer, he runs Skeptic Magazine. He's a great guy. I don't know him personally, but I love this. This is exactly how I think. Skeptical mindset. It says the bottom line for skeptics is examining any testable claim for any field is the following. Is it good science? That's what he is. Is it good science? Is your claim, does this make sense scientifically? Because I know you're biased and I'm biased. Let's put this in a controlled manner. Anybody can make a claim. We all do. There's anecdotes for everything. So, and he says, no, you know, cow is too sacred to be beyond skeptical reach, and answer that simple question. Because if something works, you shouldn't be afraid to test it. If something works well, it'll just pop out in tests. No problem. Okay, spinal curves and low back pain. So we've seen this before, excessive lordosis, excessive kyphosis, scoliosis. So a 2008 systematic review, otherwise known as a meta-analysis. Systematic reviews are always the best ones to look at because they're taking all the research into account. They'll eliminate what they feel studies were not done well or weren't controlled well or maybe had biased researchers or whatnot. And they find the highest quality studies and they look for consistencies within the studies or inconsistencies. So in 2008, systematic review of more than 50 studies was done, found no association between measurements of spinal curves and pain. And we all know this. You can talk about anecdote. We all know this. Some people come in and they got this going on, no pain. Other people got perfect posture and they're always in pain. This is a quote from one of the studies. Differences in regional lumbar spine angles. So regional would be lumbar, thoracic, or cervical, or range of motion. So that's actually your ability to move through those movements. Some people say, oh, that's a stiff segment, or that's the area that doesn't move. Between segments failed to show an association with future development of low back pain. So you can't look at somebody's... I used to, when the back pain stuff and the posture assessments, I went through all that stuff in the late 90s and early, and I was obsessed with it. And, you know, because it's kind of ego. Oh, none of your doctors could figure out... Oh, well, did they bother to look at your posture? I did. You know what I mean? It's so ego building to be able to think that you know secrets that all those doctors with all their schooling didn't know. You know, we all fall into that stuff. Believe me, I fell into it. Swan dive. So, very ego boosting, but many research studies here. Systematic review in 2007 and another one in 2008. So you can't say, oh, well, you don't have pain now. I love this one. But you will. That's like saying, oh, you haven't gotten in a car accident yet, but you will. And then when you get in a car accident, you go, told you. It's been shown statistically that 90% of the people in most populations, like us, are going to experience back pain at least sometime in their life. Pretty safe bet to say that. All right. Spinal neutral zone. You know, we all hear, oh, neutral. Now, some studies that looked at models of the spine found that neutral was where the spine was the strongest. But this was not done in humans. It was mechanical models. However, no study exists to show a correlation between mechanical changes in the neutral zone and low back pain. That was a 2007 review. By the way, this stuff was taken out of I.L. Lederman's paper. Now remember, this isn't his research studies. This is not his bias. He's just summarizing this huge body of research on this. He just went and pulled it all together and looked at claims versus the evidence. So he's done a lot of the hard work for me. And some of these I pulled other places. We hear this one a lot. lower cross syndrome, anterior pelvic tilt. That means the glutes are weak and the abs are weak and the low back is tight and the hip flexors are tight. We already know, ding one, hip flexors aren't tight. We already know that's, or at least the psoas isn't. We know that one. Well, what about abdominal weakness, since this is a core workshop? No relationship that exists between pelvic angle, lumbar lordosis, and abdominal strength. 1995, and again in 97. And actually, in another research study done in 87, very ahead of the research, I love saying that, the actual researchers urged physical therapists, this is exactly what they said, avoid prescribing therapeutic exercise program of abdominal muscle strengthening in patients with low back pain based solely on assessment of standing posture. Because there's no correlation. Or they couldn't find one. Hamstring and psoas tightness and low back pain. And we already know psoas, out. What about hamstring? Prospective studies of inflexibility at lower extremities, hamstrings and psoas tightness also fail to predict future episodes of low back pain. 88 and again 10 years later in 98. So I actually took this, this is actually from a blog post, a guy named Todd Hallgrove. I don't know him personally. I've read his blog. I think he's got some really cool information. This is the title of the blog, Does Anterior Pelvic Tilt Cause Low Back Pain? He did a nice summary of the research. I gave you these papers. There's a tremendous amount of it in there. So believe me, I'm over-researching you now. But I took this from him because he just already laid it out quite nicely, so I just copy and paste, and as long as I give him credit. So, summary of the research correlations between low back pain and pelvic tilt as related to spinal curvature. So like I said, the depth reading is right here. No difference in lumbar curvature between people with and without low back pain. So they couldn't just say people with pain all had this same curvature, people didn't. It was across the board, so no direct correlations. No difference in lumbar lordosis between people of different ages or in people with and without pain. So you can't say, oh, the older you get, the more of this you get, whatever. No direct correlations there. No difference in thoracic kyphosis, lumbar lordosis, and sacral inclination, sacral base angle, between people with acute low back pain and chronic low back pain, because that's a big thing. First off, it's 90% will have non-specific back pain, which means you can't just say, I was rear-ended and, I went into extension and, this hurts me. That's specific pain. This movement hurts. That's different because we know that we want to avoid that movement. But it's the people that have non-specific. No matter how much I stretch, no matter how much I do this, it just always aches. When I sit in the car, it just aches. That kind of stuff. And that's what most of your clients have. Low back pain is not associated with the degree of lumbar lordosis pelvic tilt. These are all his references. You can go to his site and find the research studies. Systematic review of 56 studies found no strong evidence association between measurements of spinal curves and pain. I think he's referencing the same one I did. I thought it was 50 or 52. One of us is wrong there, but that's all right. It's over 50. All right, I broke all the rules on a slide here. You're supposed to have like 4 bullet points or something, and I went totally crazy. I love this. It's not denial. I'm just very selective about the reality I accept. I like that one. So that's what I find a lot of this. So I want to address the common arguments that I get. And I have a whole series that goes into assessment, and I delve into hours and hours looking at the research. And okay, so what do we do, smarty pants, and this, that, different workshop. But in general, I get these 5 responses because this stuff is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to not be agreed with. It's uncomfortable to think, oh my God, I was wrong about this, or but I've seen this work. It's, you guys are taking it well. Believe me, people get mad at me. People get mad. Again, this is all stuff in these social psychology books. So we hold our beliefs like values, and when somebody challenges it, we feel like we have to defend. Me, I'm thankful. I go, well, thank you. I want to give my clients the best, and if this is not the best use of their time, thank you. I'm not going to get mad. So the first accusation that anybody who writes about this stuff gets, cherry picking. They go, oh, well, you just picked the studies out that validated what you believe. What about the other studies? Great question. Great question. There are about, and actually Todd in his post, this post, he actually says that he found, and I've seen a couple of them, he found 3 studies that did show a small correlation between pelvic tilt, or spinal curves and pain. Now, I will tell you what is not necessarily debated is heavy curves, extreme curves, like crazy scoliosis. That is definitely associated with pain. That's pretty consistent in the research. But the normal stuff that we see, little lordosis, little scoliosis, that's not. So extreme cases are. All right, so there are some studies that do show it. But what did I say in the beginning? What's the majority say? There's this monster majority, 50-some studies that say, and there's 2 or 3 studies that go, I'm going over here. I'm going with the majority. So like I said, yes, there is research that can show just about anything. What's the majority of the research say? Now, I also, this printout, so this original article that Dr. Letterman wrote, The Fall of the PSB Model, Postural Structure Biomechanical Model, was published in Journal of Manual Therapy, I think. I'm looking here. Yeah, Journal of Bodywork and Movement Therapies. Now, when they published it, so here's the full article, and then this one has his partial article, and it has the rebuttals. So what the journal did was they knew this article was going to, it challenges what a lot of people believe, even though the evidence is the evidence. So they invited about 4 or 5 other experts, manual therapists. They even invited Stu McGill to write rebuttals to his paper. So none of them were like trying to stick their nose where it didn't belong. They were invited to do this. Say, okay, well, you say this, well, we say this. So this has the rebuttals in there. So what I wanted to show you guys was interesting, because if you look at Isles' paper and you look at the vast amount of evidence he provides, and 4 or 5 people try to rebut it, and their amount of evidence is like this. They're cherry picking. And, well, this one study shows this. And it's like, yeah, what about all this? So, and it's funny because I don't even want to show you the title. It's even in the title. And I'm not taking this guy's side. I don't know Dr. Lederman. One of these responses, it's titled, "Without science, there must be art." This guy here is basically saying, yeah, the science doesn't work, but I don't care. Okay, that's cool. He's into belief. I'm cool with that. He's admitting it. But he's basically conceding, yeah, we don't have the science. And then he goes on to rebut it. The postural structural model is another one with boundary conditions. So everybody's going, you're right, but I still don't care. That's pretty much what most people are doing in this paper. Here's another one I want to show you real quick. Evidence and clinical experience, the challenge when they conflict. Another rebuttal. So if you think I'm cherry picking, I wanted to show you this because all these people that spent hours and hours formulating these papers all are conceding it's not cherry picking. That is what the evidence says. So here you go. Now, the best rebuttal in here, which is a common rebuttal I hear, which if you use this, you start telling people this stuff, if they're kind of into these things, the best response, and this is what Stu McGill based his off of, is, now don't look here, subgroups. So in general, what they'll say is, yeah, well, here's the problem with all that research. And I get it all the time. I always tell people, I go, the faces change, but the questions stay the same. So you throw up this research, and the people who are into that stuff, and they go, well, yeah, and their excuse is, but they don't subgroup. So essentially their rebuttal is this. Well, you take 100 people with back pain. Some people have disc problems. Some people have vertebrae problems. Some people have a flexion problem. Other people have an extension problem. Other people have a rotary problem. And you just group them all as back pain people, and you give them all the same intervention. And, of course, you come out with, some people get better, some people don't. So you end up with a null response, no guarantees. Well, of course that's not going to work. But if you took everybody and subgrouped them, you took the rotational people and you gave them a specific treatment based on what they couldn't do, and you took the extension people and you took, right? Very reasonable argument. Very reasonable argument. And I agree. But it actually reinforces, it does not go against, it reinforces the whole point of this, which is you cannot make leaps and connections of cause and effect between posture and alignment and pain, either a cause or a prediction of future cause. So in their rebuttal, they're admitting that everybody needs to be assessed as an individual. We can't make generalizations, which is what we're doing. So in me, when they think they're defending it, I say, you're basically saying the paper's right. Now, you could say, oh, well, what happens if we subgroup? Well, this paper addresses that. I put this here. This was British Journal. No, I'm not sure what this stands for. I can't remember. It was 2008. So this is what they said about this argument. A common explanation for this discrepancy is the perceived heterogeneity difference of patients with chronic nonspecific low back pain. It is felt that the effects of treatment may be diluted by the application of a single intervention to a complex, heterogeneous group with diverse treatment needs. This argument presupposes that current treatment is effective when applied to the correct patient, individualized essentially. An alternative perspective is that the clinical trials are correct and the current treatments have limited efficacy. That is also a possibility, which the people who are in tend to leave out. So this paper argues that there are numerous problems with the subgrouping approach and that it may not be as important reason for disappointing results of the clinical trials. So they address that, and you could read that paper. Also, what that argument validates is something else, because again, I like to catch people in contradictions, because I catch myself in them. If you believe that everybody needs to be assessed thoroughly if pain is a problem to get a specific treatment intervention right, then you cannot be for personal trainers bothering with this stuff because we're not equipped to do that type of assessment. So you just ruin that argument in your rebuttal, because that's not what we're trained to do. And it's a lot of trainers who are coming back with me, and I go, well, you just basically said you need a professional who knows how to assess the difference between this problem versus that problem, and you're not qualified to do that. From a weekend course and reading a book? No, sir. So you just took yourself out of the assessment game. Where do you stand now? And it's kind of like, and then they just get mad at me. I'm not saying I'm right, I'm just saying that's a contradiction. All right. Other people bring up Stu McGill's work, because McGill's books, fantastic books, by the way, one of the most research, evidence-based people out there, and one of whom I most respect in that game. And they go, oh, well, he's doing a lot of the side planks and the bird dogs and, all that stuff. Well, everybody misinterprets, or everybody, most people I come in contact with, they seem to misinterpret what is doing there. There's not one point in that book where McGill makes a claim that he has found the magic treatment to fix these things. His approach, and this is from one of his articles, he's simply removing the painful positions and movements while emphasizing pain-free exercises. And he's basically saying, okay, well, if you have a spine that doesn't deal with compression well, and we don't want to put a lot of movement on it, let's keep it still and do these low-level exercises and build up the capacity. Spare the spine. That's called, if it hurts, don't do it, and limit the exercise to what you're capable of. Right? I'm not saying that in an insulting manner. He's just put a lot of reason and effort and science to show that that is a good strategy. But when you strip away all the technical talk, that is what he's doing. There is no magic to it. And I don't think he'll ever claim there is. I've never heard him make claims to it. All right? So what he's doing does not refute any of this. He's not talking about fixing pelvic postures and fixing this stuff. He's saying, if it hurts when you bend forward, don't bend forward, and let's strengthen you in a way that prevents you from doing that. And let's not do any other exercise that inhibit the healing process, that beat up on your spine. That's it. And the last one I want to address, we're almost done here, is the I've seen it work. I don't care what the science says. I've seen it work. Okay, that's totally cool. However, you have to remember that there are people out there who have seen just about anything work that you can possibly dream of that are different. There's people who say, I did nothing and my back got better. Does that make them right and you wrong? There are people, I had a client who smoked a pack a day. His lungs were like, his doctor couldn't believe it. He was in his 80s. Does that mean smoking isn't bad for you? Worked for him. It's an anecdote. The other thing I want to bring up here is regression to the mean. Does anybody know what that is? All right, regression to the mean is this. You've all heard of the Madden curse? Whoever gets on the cover of the Madden game, they get hurt or they have a bad year the next year, it's the Madden curse. No. That just means we're horrible at looking at statistics. It's a regression to the mean. What gets you, you're going, what does this have to do with training? I'm getting to that. What gets you on the cover of Madden? Yes, you had a breakout season. You went above the mean. Then you go back to the mean, because how everything works, back to the mean. You don't have another breakout season because otherwise it wouldn't be a breakout season. And everybody is looking at what you did before and go, oh, Madden curse. No. You just regress to the mean. How many of you have had neck pain, shoulder pain, back pain? It goes up, and then every day it gets a little bit better. Sometimes, or if you have chronic pain, oh, sometimes it's worse than others. We hear all this stuff before. So what happens? So yeah, you've seen it work. Your client comes in, oh, my back is really hurting today. Oh, let's do some special stuff. Let's stretch this and tighten this and let's breathe this way, whatever your magic stuff is. In 3 weeks, 2 weeks, a month, it goes away. Of course it did. That's what happens. You roll your ankle, every day it gets a little better. The only thing is, whenever we do something, we correlate the results to whatever we did that was unique. But you just regress back to the mean. Your body took care of itself. The purpose of studies is to take away the other variables and make sure it wasn't just your body healing itself. And most of the time that's what happens. So when people say, I've seen it work, I have no doubt you saw it work. It's more likely it was regression to the mean. You just went back to normal. Whatever you did differently. That's why you have plenty of people who swear by every supplement, every treatment up and down, many of which have been proven not to work over and over again. Sugar pills, all these things. Normally, that's one of the big ones. Regression to the mean. So, and also, statistics-wise, I can give you the reference for this if you want it. Statistics show that most acute low back pain, LBP, begins to improve after 2 to 5 days and typically resolves itself in less than 1 month. So we use, we use integrated and targeted core exercises that each individual can do. This is my thing. Comfort and control. Can you do it in good technique, the technique that I want, in the range of motion and can you do it pain-free and does it feel good to you? That to me defines what exercises I select and how you do them right there. Nothing technical. It's always the what your doctor didn't catch, but I caught it because I'm so smart for my weekend course. Oh, what do those PhDs know? All that stuff, it sounds pretty good. I hope it works kind of stuff. We all have that. But let's not forget it's highly debated and often anecdotal or just plain pseudoscience. We'll focus on the proven principles. What are they? Said principle and overload. So, this is one of my little favorite sayings. Get your facts straight, then distort them as you please. So, you guys know my website. I appreciate all your time. So, any